right. In absence of a gavel, I'm just going to go ahead and beat on this. No, okay. I'll go ahead and call this work session to order. Do we have a printed agenda anywhere by any chance? Because I'm sorry, I left my laptop at home. Okay, so that being the case,
I would move to set the agenda.
Before
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Item number 3 is concerning the contract for the Stowe Park restroom construction.
Yes.
And Matt Hart with Morrisburg is here, and he's on a time crunch. I would ask that we move that to the first item and then proceed with the joint workshop with the Main Street Board, if that's okay with the council.
That's fine.
that's fine with me. Do you need a motion for that, or can we just make that adjustment?
I would move to set the agenda with the exception of moving item number 3, the Stowe Park restroom bid, to item number 1, and all remaining items move down the agenda accordingly.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Agenda is set. Adrian, if you'd like to bring Matt.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Matt, do you mind coming up? So this item is a follow-up from a project that you authorized, I think, earlier this year, which is renovations and expansion for the Stowe Park restroom building. This is something that you decided we would use a portion of our American Rescue Plan Act funding for, which is our federal funding. I'll let Matt go over the process for the bidding, but this is Matt Hart, whom you know is with Morrisburg. They handle the design of the Stowe Park restroom renovations. The floor plan and the building rendering are in your packet for that. We did receive bids for it. They came in about what we thought, but I will turn it over to Mr. Hart.
Sure. Thank you for your time this afternoon, Council, on this, what we feel like is an important project to improve the downtown facilities. It's appropriate today, I think, to have Main Street here with us for your workshop on a project that they were actually involved with. During the conceptual design phase, we did work with a number of their staff to help decide sort of what scope got included with this project, and that floor plan, the final floor plan that we ended up designing, is there included in your packet, as Adrian mentioned. We bid the project earlier in October. We did receive 3 responsible bids, local contractors in the Charlotte and Gastonia region. The low bidder, as listed in your packet, is Wharton Smith out of Charlotte, North Carolina. We received 3 references from them, and with glowing remarks, both from the town of Dallas and Mecklenburg County. There are a couple of alternates there for consideration. I do believe that the motion is to adopt a $600,000 budget, which would cover the base bid, the alternates, as well as any contingency that would be required during construction. As a renovation, there is a potential for unforeseen conditions, and so having a contingency over and beyond the base bid amount would be our recommendation. I would also like to add that in our bids, what we do as a company on these types of projects is we ask the contractor to add their own contingency of 5%, which again is City of Belmont's money. If it does not get spent during the course of construction, that money does return back to you. That's 5% of their bid, which is just north of $26,000. So there is some contingency that you've included that may not be spent if not needed. Any questions or comments?
Well, if we get this approved and everything, I think the idea is to get everything up and the work done before our busy season of concerts and events in the park next spring and summer.
I can explain that a little bit.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why it's on your agenda tonight, instead of at a normal city council meeting, we've reached out to these contractors and tried to anticipate shop drawing review and material procurement so that we can start doing that now over the course of October and November. so that after and the contractor knows that after the Belmont Christmas Parade, which we all know is a very big event, they can then mobilize on December 1st and begin construction. We've anticipated a 5-month construction timeline. That's pretty aggressive. We would probably see more of a 6-month construction time, which pushes us just after Easter. So not quite into the busy season, but still perhaps need to consider restroom facilities for like the Easter egg hunt and things like that. But we've tried to procure this and bid this in a way that benefits the city in terms of timing and procurement of materials.
Matt, let me ask you, the exterior of the building, is that going to be brick?
Good question. In your packet, there is a rendering of a brick building where we suggested that it would match the existing architecture that's already there with the little addition. The alternate number 2, which is $9,700, would be to add a stone water table to the building and then apply a stucco to the brick so that it matches the other structures within Stowe Park. And this would be a recommendation. We designed it to fit in. We didn't know quite where the money was going to come in this volatile market. But that is an alternate that we would suggest because it would then match sort of the amphitheater structure as well as the serpentine wall that goes along Stowe Park with the retaining wall.
Because I thought that's recollection. That's what we were looking at doing, was trying to bring that into the landscape of the rest of the park.
Yes, sir. So the base bid was sort of a worst case scenario. And then we do additive alternates to allow the contractor to bid a scope of work that allows you to decide whether or not you want to add that to the project. And sometimes we have deductive alternates to take things out of the project to fit within a project scope. This was an additive alternate. And like I said, we would recommend you add that to the budget so that it fits into the whole character of Stowe Park.
What was that dollar figure again?
$9,700.
And that's for a skirt, basically?
It's a applied water table, so up to about 3.5 feet of that stone. It's the same stone that was used. We actually consulted with Tiz Johnson, who did the serpentine wall, and then adding a stucco color to get rid of the brick lines and to make it a smooth surface. You could look at old stone, for instance, for that sort of stucco look that would, again, match the color of the pavilion there at Stowe Park. It's, in our opinion, the $9,700 is a money well spent, would go a long way. Durability of the building, the look of the building, with minimal cost, with a pretty big return on investment from aesthetics.
All right, but you guys don't have any renderings of what that might look like available?
We can provide that.
Okay. I mean, I would like to see that. I think that was initial plan, was to try to tie everything
Sure.
in.
Can you give me like a week?
That's fine, yeah.
Yeah, we can update the renderings. It may just take us a little bit to get the colors right and a stone water table imported.
I mean, how does the rest of the council feel about that? This discussion, I think Martha and I may have been the only ones who were here when we were considering that. And do you find that rock appealing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense to have a decent look for the whole park. It doesn't appear to really add that much to the project from a cost perspective, so I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah, I think it'll look good.
All right, do you have any more questions, anyone, at this moment? All right, sorry, I'm trying to read this.
So
Okay.
then the motion would be to accept the bid from Wharton Smith with those add alternates, and then you'll provide us with the updated rendering.
I would make a motion to approve the bid with the add-on alternates that we've discussed and a contingent project budget of $600,000. Authorize the city attorney to review the contract and the city manager to sign a satisfactory contract to be paid out of ARPA funds.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes.
One quick comment, we really appreciate working with you guys. And then second comment, Do you want us to help draft the contract? Do you have AIA documents, or do you want us to kick that off with Parks and AJ?
We don't have AIA documents.
Do you want us to handle that
Yes,
then?
please.
Okay, pass that along this week. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, that would bring us now to our joint workshop with the Main Street Advisory Board.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Last year you had a workshop about this time of year with the Main Street Advisory Board. They requested another workshop with you to kind of talk about successes for this year and to get direction on their work plan for next year. So they found this to be productive. Hopefully you found this productive last year, and so we'd like to do that again this year. I'll turn it over to Phil Bogan, our downtown director.
Thank you for allowing us to come back. As you said, this workshop is very beneficial for our board. The process for us annually is about this time of the year. We develop a new work plan for our program in each of our committees, and it's always helpful to have this conversation with you to get feedback and input from you so that we have kind of guidance and direction from you on the key projects out there that we, as our committee members, need to incorporate into our work plan. So that's why the timing is good. And so basically, the state staff come in, and at this point it's Liz and Sherry. They're coming in December the 6th, 7th or so, 6th and 7th. We develop economic development strategies. And so we've had these two economic development strategies now for about 3 or 4 years, excuse me. So these were developed approximately when I came on board. And so Liz and Sherry at the state, they like for communities to update their economic development strategies every 4 to 5 years, depending on where you're at with accomplishing your tasks, your goals and your tasks that get developed each year from these strategies. So we're at the point now where when Liz and Sherry come in, we're going to tweak, update these two economic development strategies, which we as an organization develop a goal for each strategy. And then from that strategy and that goal, each of our 4 committees then develop tasks to work on each year. And so so these are our two kind of, I'll say outgoing, but they'll still be relevant in us moving forward in developing kind of where we go. And so with the development growth of Belmont, we really want to kind of hear from you on where we think we'll be in 4 to 5 years. That'll help us develop those new economic development strategies. And then we'll develop annual tasks to try to position us to accomplish those strategies over the next several years. And so, as I said, we take those strategies and then we break them down. Wrong direction, sorry. Each committee then breaks those into tasks that they will work on each month over the next year to accomplish. And so, going backwards, kind of like Alabama football team.
No, the problem was that Tennessee kept going forward.
I got that. And it's not going forward. Okay. And so again, we have 4 standing committees: the Economic Vitality Committee, the Design, Promotions, and the Economic Vitality. But before we get started, I really want to introduce Jennifer, our new board chair. You all know Jennifer and what she means to this community. She's been, of course, first of all, we do have one outgoing board member. That's Angela Street. She has served this community, this organization for 2 terms. And when Jennifer and I have been talking, getting ready for this, she really kind of hit the nail on the head and talked about how Angela set the bar for really how a chair of an organization should really operate. So Angela, thank you for your leadership. And then trying to find somebody to replace Angela as far as we had to beg
design chair. Seth Sharon is not with us today. He is our organization chair. And our two council representatives, Sillinger and Jim Pepper, thank you so much. And our unbelievably great Main Street team. Bill Bogan, our downtown director, and Morgan Abernathy. Thank you all. Could not do this without this group. Bill, back to you.
All right, so now we'll kind of dive a little bit. We do have a presentation, but during this presentation, there's opportunity for us to really, we want this to be an open dialogue. We want this to be, kind of give and take. We really want to hear from you, get direction from you. So we'll start off with our Economic Vitality Committee. And the focus for this committee is really to kind of understand the economics of downtown, where you at with your businesses, what your business needs are, maintaining your building inventory, keeping that updated so that we know the business is going to be leaving. We can kind of go ahead and start that search and try to find your business to come in. Like I said, really track that business activity. It's all about supporting your existing businesses and also recruiting new businesses that come that we want to recruit to come into our community. So at this time, we'll turn it over to Joe and Al, our Economic Vitality Committee chairs, to talk a little bit about the accomplishments and then moving forward from there.
I'll start out. Can you hear me? You know, I'm supposed to kind of kiss the thing. Is that the way it works? We've listed 4 items on our accomplishments because we couldn't list everything we do. And I'll just kind of do a broad brush on this because everything up there is, self-explanatory. But the commitment from, or the direction from the Main Street, North Carolina Main Street, actually National Main Street, it's all the same ultimately. But when you boil it down to its bare facts, Belmont is very unique. The whole Main Street concept was developed for Main Street's in trouble. And we don't have a Main Street in trouble, we have a Main Street opportunity. Yes, we have our challenges, but the point I want to make is since I got involved with the EV, which has been some time now, 6 years, I believe, we're trying to be more intentional about what's coming down the pike instead of being reactive, trying to be proactive. So we're getting out there. I'll use the middle school as an example to start off with. The middle school has been up in the air for a long time. And I'm proud of the fact that our committee took a leadership role in that effort. And we're pretty involved in the process of how it evolved, where it landed. Where it landed is not perfect yet, but I'll use the Friday Night Live venue in the upper field as an example of how the community is alive with that upper field. Now that's still not part of the middle school, but you can sense the community wants to figure out a way for that whole complex to stay connected. That's what I call our Central Park. And I won't digress any more than that. The whole point is, I think our committee is really broad-based. We get really involved with a lot of details. We're working behind the scenes all the time. We have our wish list about the types of business that we want to recruit to the community. If there's a vacancy, this is what we're looking for. And our members actually report back about things that they'd like to see on Main Street. The only other thing I'll comment on is, well, I'll just touch on it real briefly. The brochure, self-explanatory. Thanks to Jennifer, we started developing a recruiting brochure that can be like the ideal thing and a prospective business owner to say, why don't you come to Belmont and take a look at what we got going on here? We'd like your business to relocate to Belmont. It's perfect for that. And it's perfect for bragging on Belmont. It's a lot to brag about And I don't know how many pages that brochure has turned out to be, but we're right at the cusp of having and be able to hand you a printed version. And the rest of it, downtown parking, we're working now on some other ideas. I know there's been some discussion about the parking deck, but we've been working, has kind of a separate subcommittee on trying to identify different surface parking opportunities in the downtown area. There's still a lot of flat out there that's not being used as parking. And we're trying to come up with a plan where we'll come back to you and make a presentation on what some of those opportunities are. And with that, I'll turn it over to my friend Joe to talk about.
Thanks, Al. Council, thank you again for your time. It's important for you and the Main Street Board to have a good synergy for Belmont. It's good for everybody. The common thread that we have is we all love Belmont. We want it to thrive and to be good and to always be growing and welcoming and all those things. So we walk the fine line of being progressive and growing and maintaining the history and the things we love about our small, quaint downtown area. If you recall our last workshop, we discussed a number of different things that we wanted to work toward and we wanted to chase down and see if there were good ideas for downtown. And we were tasked with certain things, and I think we've accomplished most of those things. And then other things were side conversations that we were having. And one of the takeaways that we had was the discussion of the MSD. MSDs are kind of a dry subject. If you start reading it, there's not a whole lot of fun about it. So as I go through my presentation, please ignore the goofy pictures of dogs. Those are my son's contributions to the slides, just to try to liven it up a little bit. But what I wanted to do, Phil, do you want to flip for me?
Joe sent us some slides later this afternoon. We put them in.
Can we get to them? They would be better with slides.
Do you have it on a flash drive?
I don't. Do not have a flash drive.
I've got them.
Yeah, I mean, we'll go through them. Again, I want you all to be able to follow through because it's not that it's necessarily technical by any means, but sometimes it's easier to see it. So what exactly is an MSD? There's an act that was created in 1973 that gave city council certain authority to do certain things. And one of the specific items of authority they were allowed to do was to create a service district, a municipal service district. Now, it is a very defined thing. It is a very narrowly tailored thing. But what it essentially allows city council to do is to levy a tax on a certain area that does not apply to other areas of the city. So city council can come in and define an area of need, and that area of need, the city council can then levy a certain percentage tax on that area specifically for a need that is identified. We'll get into a little bit of the tax rates and what those look like. But the important thing to know is that in this act, there are very specific reasons that an MSD can be created. They're rather broad. I think in some early readings that we were doing as the EV committee and some of the other committees that were looking at this as a possible fundraising opportunity, it fell kind of into this, it must be revitalization, right? That's why it was originally created, for the idea of revitalizing a downtown area or even an urban area or whatever it may be. It was later revised to broaden that. So it no longer fell into the idea of it just having to be used for revitalization purposes. So now there are specific purposes that are laid out. Some of them are kind of broad, some of them are not so broad. But what we were looking at it for specifically was the idea of either surface parking or a parking deck. Because again, we were talking about this a year ago, and we were really having a lot of conversations about a parking deck and what that would look like. Hold on, yeah, you're good. We can go to the next slide. Okay, thank you. Again, that was not my idea. But so when we looked at parking decks, we heard crazy numbers, $250,000 per space, $22 million, $50 million. The cities that do get parking decks, they get state funding to do 80% of it, whatever that may be. So when we were looking at the MSD as whether it was appropriate for parking solution, that is the scope that this is achieving today. That is not to say that there is not an idea out there that MSD wouldn't be a perfect fit for or would be a perfect fit for. But as far as parking goes, that's what we're discussing today. The purpose of an MSD, really, the committee scope in reviewing the appropriateness of an MSD in the downtown for parking or additional parking. It can be for a lot of other things. Again, I've already said while this was coming up, revitalization is not necessarily a thing, but it is the foundation of the original drafting of it. So something to keep in mind. What is important to understand is that City Council, if you draft this, if you find the need for one, you have to specifically show a demonstratively greater need in the service area as opposed to any other place in the town. So whatever it may be, parking, perfect example. Is there a demonstrably bigger need for parking right now, currently in downtown than there is in other parts of Belmont? That's up for your discussion. But we're going to look at whether the MSD would be the appropriate avenue to find that. In order to establish an MSD, it's really not that complicated. You would have a meeting, you would designate an area, it would have to be shown on a map. It then has to be sent out to the public to look at and to review, specifically any property owner that it impacts. So if the MSD impacts the property owner, they must know about it. There's all kind of time frames given. I'm not going to bore you with all those. But certain timelines have to be hit given this public notification. Then in the event, everything goes through, everybody is in agreement, City Council has to vote on it in 2 separate meetings and approve it both times. I find that interesting. I suppose that's probably because it's a tax, and there's a great importance on the power of taxation. And so we really want to make sure that City Council is behind MSD in the event it is approved. So it has to be approved again by the majority vote 2 times in 2 separate meetings.
The same thing?
Exact same thing.
Exact same thing?
Exact same thing has to happen twice. All right. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay. There can be requested exclusions from MSDs. So I think that's the big question when everybody thinks, okay, we can apply this, an additional tax on a given area that you solely designate. How's that going to sit with the people? And then what can they do to argue against it? And there is specific avenues for property owners to request that they're excluded. So in order to do that, they have to submit a written request to City Council within 5 days of the public meeting. That's not the approval of it, but 5 days before the public meeting where it's being discussed, which again, I found odd that they would have to be that far ahead. But it has to be a written request, and then they have to state with, and this is straight out of it, particularity, the reasons why the tract or parcel is not in need of the services by a demonstrably greater extent than the remainder of the city. So it's the exact opposite. The property owner would have to argue to City Council in order to be excluded. Now, City Council, you pick case by case whether there are exclusions or not. So it's solely up to
I don't know if I use pick as the right word.
Well, you make a determination as to the presentation of the facts, whether that person would be excluded or not. There's a specific exclusion for public service organizations that hold private property. That I included that because it is an exclusion. Additional considerations in this. So this is where we get a little more into showing the dollars and what it can do. There is a statutory limit on the amount that can be assessed. Now, exactly what that statutory limit is, I don't have it in front of me, but what I can tell you is that from the reports of the North Carolina Main Street studies that we have and tables, which I'm happy to share with all of you, it falls between 10 cents and 28 cents per hundred. That's where it is. 28% or 28 cents per hundred is the highest levied in North Carolina. 10 cents is the least. Now, that doesn't really help you too much to know how much that raises. And we'll talk about that a little more as we start looking at some of the specific numbers. There is specific language that addresses the importance that City Council is cautious to avoid accumulating an excess fund. So they don't want excess funds beyond what is necessary to meet the specific narrowly tailored need that the MSD is being created for. Also, it can take into consideration some long-term planning, so some excess revenues for that, and then a little bit can be maintained for just keeping the fund. But again, getting to that language that is supposed to be very narrowly tailored, the MSD also, once it has achieved the plan goal, is supposed to be repealed at that point. So it's not supposed to be a continuing thing indefinitely. It's supposed to be something that is very, again, tailored to the need that is found and addressed by City Council. Okay, next slide, please.
Can I ask you one quick question?
Yes, sir.
Did you guys run the numbers based on the tax rolls right now, how much this might accrue at, say, 20?
Yes, and I will get to that at the end. I have a statistics page slide, and I'll kind of show you some better numbers as what you could expect there.
If I, go ahead.
Just a quick question. Again, I don't think I was a part of the last. When we're talking about the downtown area for this potential type of districting, does that include residential as well, or are we just talking about commercial?
It can include residential. So an MSD can.
But that would go to my question, which is a good
segue.
segue, is that I would assume when you said you can request to be excluded,
Yes.
in
All
my mind,
all
a
residential.
residents could come and say, well, if the purpose is parking for our downtown businesses, we are not contributing to that, therefore, we should be excluded from that because it doesn't
Correct.
fit with the purpose.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's what we'll get into a little bit right here. After meeting, so we had a number of meetings on it in the EV committee. I then shared this with the Main Street Advisory Board, and we walked away with kind of the same understanding or same opinion to put forward to you as far as whether we think an MSD is an appropriate action for parking or a parking deck. So the EV committee would not recommend an MSD for the following reasons for the establishment of a parking deck or additional parking. I think historically the discussion of MSD has come up in a few years ago, and there was a lot of opposition to it in the downtown property owners. Now, whether that temperature has changed, I can't tell you. What I can tell you is before an MSD would be created or pursued, I think it would make sense to do some polling in the downtown area or wherever the MSD would apply. Again, I'm assuming that this would be in the downtown area. So having some questionnaires or maybe just getting the temperature of the property owners to avoid any unnecessary friction would be a good first step. I think the main one that we walked away with was that Gaston County has notified property owners that they're reevaluating property in 2023. So there's a full expectation that property values are going to increase pretty dramatically. And along with that, obviously Gaston County their tax revenues will increase, but the city of Belmont's tax revenues on those properties will increase as well. Whether the timing of establishing an MSD now on top of the reevaluation would make sense, again, is up to council, but something to keep in mind. Property owners, of course, can ask to be excluded. And when it comes to most residential, I would expect that most residential owners would ask to be excluded. Regardless of the reason the MSD was being created. Of course, for parking, I think any residential owner in downtown would say, what do I need a parking deck for? And it probably would be a pretty good argument that they wouldn't need a parking deck. But there are some other areas that MSDs could possibly be appropriate that you would still have residential property owners, I think, asking to be removed. So then our downtown area is not a really large downtown. It's pretty small as far as just looking at other towns. But there's a lot of residential in it as well. So if we pick those people out, I think the other thing that will hurt in the acceptance of this in the public's eye is that a lot of the property owners in downtown that own the buildings, they are not owner-occupied buildings. They are leased spaces. So someone owns the building, they have a tenant in the building. The owner is being levied the new tax, and somehow that new tax is going to trickle down to the business owner. It's either going to be through a CAM charge and a lease, it's going to be through increased rent, but somehow that fee is going to be skirted by the owner, I'm sure, and it will fall in most situations to the business owner, which is not really what this act had in mind. So how that would be handled, how it could be drafted, and again, council, this would be up to you, getting creative and how that is done. but I would foresee that happening pretty regularly, and then seeing a pushback by business owners in downtown, as opposed to or in addition to a pushback from property owners in downtown. So, there's of course, whenever we talk about taxation, there's always a negative or the assumption of a negative impact or perception whenever taxes go up. But here, the average MSD revenue from a Belmont-sized town. Now, we're roughly 15,000 now. I looked it up before I came to make sure that was right. 16,000 and less is what I looked at in our spreadsheet that we get from the North Carolina Main Street group. And of all of the cities that are 16,000 or less, their average MSD revenues per year is $52,000. So that's average from cities our size. So I think you could expect that ballpark as far as implementing an MSD. Now, with that said, I have a little more information. If I can find my sticky note here. Al was kind enough to share with me. So he has a master plan of property owners in the downtown area. And so we went and looked at the historic district. So the historic district of downtown, the property value is roughly, I think it was $9 million, some odd $1,000 currently. If the MSD was implemented at the highest rate that we've seen in North Carolina, which is 28 cents per hundred, you would be looking at $26,000. If it was the lowest rate, the downtown historic district would produce $9,300. So those are the two extremes that we see in North Carolina. Now, that is the historic district alone. Obviously, your council is not bound by the designation of certain districts, unless there are some caveats in the languaging of it, but really for purposes of parking or other things, you would not be bound by that. So you can see there, I think the balance and what we would offer as an opinion to council is, whenever you're talking about new taxes, you would expect some pushback, and there's going to be a balancing act between the ruffling of the feathers versus the outcome and what you can get and achieve by doing that. And those numbers share a little bit about that. The final statistics I did want to share with you, if you go to the next, there you go. All right, so there are 67 reporting North Carolina main streets. 32 have MSDs. So it's pretty close to half. The average annual income across those 67 is $86,000. Now, I'll be honest with you, when I started looking at this, I assumed it would be more because we have a lot. I mean, there are big main streets that have MSDs in North Carolina. The range, the range is, again, 10 cents to 28 cents. But where I found it more interesting were kind of the like kind with Belmont. There are 40 reporting to the North Carolina Main Street group. 40 of them, only 14 have MSDs that are Belmont sized or smaller. So you can see as it gets smaller, there are less and less MSDs. As it gets bigger, they tend to have more and more.
So, in like comparison, where do you start seeing this on average for the type? Obviously, Charlotte being the largest, and then I don't know. Where do we start seeing? Like, is it Asheville or something like that?
Well, it's reported across the state, and there's no rhyme or reason as far as who has an MSD and who doesn't.
Oh, so it's just okay.
It is, and they report a lot of statistics, but the one that we could easily grasp is just the population.
Okay.
Population of the town. Of course, some very small towns have really large downtowns. Mm-hmm. I mean, Morganton, for example, is bigger than Belmont, but its downtown is probably 6 times Belmont size. Mm-hmm. So I think there is some give and take there. There is definitely some margin for error. However, for purposes of making a high-level determination by council, I would hope this would give you some.
I drove through a city in Idaho this summer that purported to have the longest main street in the United States.
How long was that? How long was that?
I don't know. I couldn't tell. It didn't seem like the population of the town is only like 400, so I didn't see how it could be that
there you go.
long.
Perfect. So you can see there.
Town lived on Main Street.
All 400 on one line.
Yeah, so you can see it doesn't always apply. It doesn't always apply. However, for sake of our conversations, but one thing I did want to point out is that Belmont is the #1 reported sponsorship in the state in 2022 of $140,940, which I think that says a lot about the direction that the city is taking.
What do you mean by sponsorship?
That's a good question.
We report annually
Yeah.
But in
But, I mean,
2022, we
yeah.
were number one.
But that's the kind of thing, like, so if you get somebody to be a sponsor for Friday Night Live, that's what you're talking about.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. The point being, Belmont has a lot of people behind it that love it and that want to be involved and would prefer, in our opinion, would prefer to do it in a non-compulsory way. Volunteering, obviously, there are a lot of us here that love volunteering. Donations, fundraisers, things like that. The Trolley Board has done a phenomenal job raising a lot of awareness about it, raising a lot of funds for it. So I think there are a lot of ways to get the city involved that aren't necessarily an additional tax or a compulsory action. So, but that was our takeaway. That again, we also delivered that to the Main Street Board and came away with the same opinion. So if anyone has any questions on MSDs, my knowledge is not that deep. However, I did go through the act a number of times. I'll be happy to answer it to the best of my knowledge. If there's any information that goes beyond that, I'll be happy to send any council member the reports, the spreadsheets that show the amounts that come in. They're interesting to see. I would be interested to dig in a little bit and see more about how those are being managed. But again, thank you for the opportunity to pursue that and come up with some type of opinion on it.
Let me ask you just a quick couple of questions.
Sure.
Okay, so you said down in the historic districts there was $9 million of taxable property.
Correct.
I'm assuming historic district and Main Street line up exactly.
As far as revenues, or you mean like physically?
Well, when you're using the historic district to cite the number, are the businesses all located that you're speaking about that you would tax within that district?
Yes.
They overlap.
Yes.
Okay.
Are they geographically coextensive?
I don't believe they're exactly. Al,
I think
let
that's what
you
Richard.
speak to that a little bit because it was in your spreadsheet. Is the historic district under your spreadsheet where we got the $9 million? Is that pretty much all of the downtown area? The historic district. Right. We have a defined area.
No, it does not. That was just historic downtown.
Okay, so not like the Chronicle District, not the River
We have
District.
three Main Street districts. We have the historic downtown, Chronicle, and then the River District. So I think
Yes, this was only the historic district.
So there's other areas, there's other properties that would be considered part of Main Street, but not within the historic Main Street. Yeah.
Historic downtown.
Right,
Correct. And the historic district was the highest revenue
right,
of the three.
right. Well, that'll change somewhat when Chronicle opens.
Far more fewer businesses.
Yeah. Well, there'll soon be more when the Chronicle building opens. And, yeah.
All right, so when you were looking at the 14 cities, I think it was, in comparative size, their buildings may not have the same tax value. We may be physically the same number of people, but our tax value may spike well above what theirs do.
Correct.
So how did that factor in, or did it?
It did not. So when we looked at it, we did an average. So most of the reported numbers, when they report the average of MSD income, they're just doing it across the board. And so we narrowed that down simply to a population size similar to Belmont when we looked at that smaller swatch.
Okay, thank you.
And
Does anyone else have any other questions?
more, and this is just out of that 52K that we're roughly estimating that we would yield as the city of Belmont. Just to how I interpreted that, if we passed this district and we said it was because of parking, for example, that 52K has to be spent on parking. So if we're saying a parking deck is our reason, it's going to take quite a few years.
Sure,
sure.
That's what I'm trying to get to.
Yes,
So,
it does have to specifically be used for the reason that the district was created. That's correct.
gotcha. So
Assuming that was the only funding we had for the parking.
Right.
deck.
correct, assuming that. Okay.
Correct.
So I just wanted to make sure I understood that correct. Thank you.
But I want to clarify because he said 52. I thought you said we would get 26,000 based on what you're projecting.
The 52 was the average of the 14 that are Belmont sized.
Okay.
Right. I was just picking that out.
Yeah. Okay.
And the 26 is the number that you came off based on the taxable value within the district.
That's
The
correct.
historic.
Of the historic district at the highest level, at the .28. That's correct.
Let me ask you, I mean, we're talking about using this towards a parking deck. You all had talked about surface parking.
That's correct.
Are you proponents of surface parking lots, or are you proponents of a parking deck? Because the numbers, the value of that number will change depending on what you're pursuing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think our walk away from it was we would prefer to use the path of least resistance. So if there is available surface parking that makes sense, then surface parking would be a much more achievable thing for the city. Al has been looking more into the surface side. I'll let him.
Yeah, the basis of we're not opposed to a parking deck. What we're looking at was what can we get done in a shorter time frame. So we have parking needs now, Thursday, Friday, Saturday night for sure, for starters, and then during special events. So our thought was, let's investigate where we could put a surface parking lot for a relatively small amount that would make sense as an interim investment and maybe part of a longer term investment, but solve today's problem and show the community that we're doing something and not just waiting for another Friday Night Live where nobody can find a place to park so they don't come anymore. So we're not against parking deck. This is an interim thought.
I just think that was very helpful.
Thank you.
Yes, very helpful and detailed.
I think what we want to do is just, again, circle back with council and just tell you, as we're developing our work plan, we're putting a lot of time and energy into it. We want to make sure that we're being smart with our time, with our the people that great people we have that are dedicating their free time to us. So when they come in, we want to make sure that we're really pointed in the direction we go. So if there's anything that council would suggest or could give us to work for that are important to you specifically, that's what we're here for. We're here to bird dog the great ideas that council throws us to see whether it's something that's going to stick and make downtown and all of Belmont a better place to be. So,
Yeah, specifically relative to economic vitality.
yes, yes.
Joe and Al are interested here from you. Any projects, tasks, goals that you would want to suggest that they work with their committee to implement into the work plan for next year or the next couple of years that will kind of relate to the focus of the economic development, of the economic vitality committee, and understanding the economic climate downtown, business recruitment, business supporting our existing businesses.
Yeah, and any other ideas that would come up?
Well, I mean, certainly, I mean, the surface parking is something I'd be interested to hear because we've talked about that. I know Richard's talked about that a lot, and hoping, in terms of something that maybe we have more certainty and is longer term than leasing space. We've come across a couple offers, at least in my time, but the owner's asking too much, we thought, for what we'd be able to get in terms of actual parking spaces. So anything, anything that you have in terms of those ideas would certainly be something that we'd place a high priority on. I don't want to speak too much for others, but that would be something of interest to me.
Well, one item Phil and I have discussed about Stowe Park, I had seen it somewhere in my travels, very similar setup with the amphitheater in the hills. What they had done was they had cut off the front of the hill. It wasn't rolling. They had put rock on for the front of it, and they had flattened it out with a small staircase going down to make it handicap accessible. So I looked at that, and it's very, very similar to Stowe Park, and that's something I think we talked about a while back. Now, I have no idea what the cost estimates would be, but I always thought that was an attractive addition to that park. I don't know if that's in your wheelhouse or not. But
I think that's definitely, I've always, since we kind of going back to Moonlight on Main, we've
really activated Stowe Park a lot more. We've had theater, musical performances, and we've actually had a few falls and accidents in Stowe Park, especially, people trying to go up and down the hill. I think Adrian and I talked about this a couple years ago. One day, could we implement some steps to the different terraces? And then, Richard and I had a conversation out there one day about this. So I think that's something we could add to our work plan to start looking into. That might be something that we could work on, and then next year after, try to implement or looking to adding that to the CIP, maybe.
I just had a couple of them. Kind of on. I think I could go for days about ideas and stuff like that. I think you guys do a good job, as is. But you kind of touched based on it, trying to figure out what is the perpetual purpose for that field behind Stowe Park, right? We have Stowe Park, and I think just from the comments I received from this past year's Friday Night Lives, I think there's a lot of positive feedback of retaining that and keeping that within the city's grasp and using that. I mean, potential CIP project of maybe like a stage of some sort. I don't know. I'm just throwing out ideas, lighting, but I'd be interested for you guys to investigate what does a future for that piece of land look like for the city of Belmont, and how can we activate that further? It's on their business support, and I know, Phil, we've talked about this. That's a really big one for me personally. I think we had talked, I know we always talk about a lot of stuff, but it's like maybe some quarterly or frequent updates with our businesses. I think when I talk to some of the business owners, I know they really do kind of want the city to reach out, and I understand it's a two-way street. But I think, we've done a good job of recruiting and getting new businesses. And we have, I think it's 100% occupancy right now on the main street.
Pretty close.
And we're potentially going to get there to East Belmont as well. I mean, I think how can we further define those relationships between the city? Because that is our asset. That is what brings people here. So just kind of the 2 cents. And then I was just going to say East Catawba, as we see some new buildings coming up for sale, tapping into whatever opportunity we may see there to bring them into the fold, into that flagship, I would say, for Main Street. So that's just the view that I have.
Mark?
Yeah, I mean, just to add to what everybody else has said, I mean, the parking downtown is obviously a big issue, but I won't beat that to death. I think finding a way to sort of provide the same sort of revitalization we've seen in the historic district for East Belmont is important. I know there's some changes going on over there too, so this seems like a pretty good opportunity to have a plan to kind of figure out what that looks like, because I think there's a lot of potential over there. It also has the benefit of being not quite as developed as the rest of downtown, so things like parking and stuff that we're dealing with downtown now might be a little bit easier to think about over there. But yeah, I mean, I agree with everything else that's been said. I think finding additional ways to activate all the different parts of Stowe Park is important. I think that what we did with the Friday Night Live this year with the upper field was kind of a happy, I don't know what to call it, because it's not really a mistake because it worked out really well, but stuff like that, just figuring out
Fortuitous.
Yes, that's the word I was looking for. Stuff like that I think is great, and sort of the flexibility and adaptability that you guys been able to bring to stuff like that is I think great for the program.
I'm more a comment than anything else, because this has been wonderful to hear this. And also, we've talked for years about the municipal service district. So seeing all the pieces of the puzzle together, that's very much appreciated.
Okay, well, kind of talking a little bit about Upper Field and Stowe Park. If I can get this to shift.
You can't.
Did we copy over just the economic with Joe Slides? Oh, there we go. So this does segue nicely, talking about Stowe Park as far as public space, moving into the focus of our design committee, which Amy chairs. So our design committee, and let me preface this, our committees meet every month, and they're very active, good group of volunteers. And so our design committee, they focus on historic renovation, architectural assistance for our property owners downtown, working with them on any building improvements, public spaces, like we just talked about, Stowe Park and Field, and also public art. And so now I'm going to hand it over to Amy to let her talk about some accomplishments with our design committee.
Thank you. Thank you for having us again. So if you remember this time last year, we were pulling off one of our biggest accomplishments with the Museum of the Moon and the significant amount of public art that was centered around the moon, such as the global projections, art installations, concerts, and musicals. We collaborated with Belmont resident Juan Logan, who is an international artist, to install a mural on the Mecca building in the River District. And last year we worked with the station on a facade enhancement grant and corresponded with several other property owners on proper treatments to historical buildings. We are working, we're participating and working on now the sidewalk and pedestrian plan. Okay, so this year we are preparing our work plan, and we'd like to hear from you as a council. Any recommendations, any projects, tasks, ideas that you'd like to see that's relevant to design or public art?
Well, I know one thing that you've been discussing in committee has to do with, I don't know how best to describe it, but sort of like a public art being part, or funding for public art being part of development approvals, or, you know, I don't know how best to phrase that now that I'm thinking about it. But yeah. I think that would be an interesting thing, because originally I was like, well, you know, we already imposed so much, you know, this would just be another thing to impose. I don't know if I agree with that, but on the other hand, you know, money is finite, and, you know, with costs and everything, it might be a good way to get some public art that, you know, we might not otherwise think is, you know, might be too expensive, or we might not have the money for it. So I'm of two minds, and it might be a good discussion to have. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Can I give it?
We were working on a public art plan. Katie Miller, who was chairing our arts committee, you know, mother has her own business, and she was so busy she had to back off. And so we went like 4 months, the public art committee, without meeting. And so we just held our first meeting live last week, 2 weeks ago, and are getting back up to speed on where we left off with. And actually, Michael, who was a graphic designer, he was not able to join us last week, and so he is going to take over spearheading that for us. And so we will pick back up on the public art plan. We'll incorporate that into our new work plan for next year.
Would that have been, with the discussions, was that essentially if a new development plan comes, or proposed development plan comes through during the conditional process, we would suggest that they perform, or they pay, or
there's a lot of states and cities have what they call a percent for art program, and there's a threshold. So once a project meets the construction budget meets a certain threshold, then a percentage of that must go back into public art. But it's not necessarily just public art. You can also utilize that depending on how it's constructed. You know, lighting fixtures, instead of going to Lowe's and buying lighting fixtures, you can get an artist to actually design, you know, creative works for the project.
And
so
it's all on site of the proposed
correct.
development? Okay,
Correct.
okay. It's
Correct.
not, hey, you're coming in, paint Main Street for
right.
us.
So
right?
no,
Okay. That's
yeah.
not, I didn't.
And one example is in the Chronicle Mill, in that renovation, a lot of times when there's a project, Shelley and the planners will pass something down to our design committee to get involved and look at. And one thing is the side of the platform parking deck. And so one of the conditions, after communicating with our design committee and the planning team, was to do some screening, but also allow a mural to be part of the screening on the parking deck. So we're currently working with Jennifer's spearheading that for us, a collaborative effort with Chronicle Mill to actually do a mural on as part of the screening. So that's similar to kind of a public art program, or
Got you. That
just
makes
kind of
sense.
incorporating some art into the project somehow, some way.
That's awesome.
One thing I'd like for us to pursue, I know it didn't work out initially with Juan Logan with the project that was discussed, but we still need to have something of major impact with him being a local artist and nationally known.
Right. And so May Barger, who is kind of spearheading the thread trail and incorporating public art on the thread trail, she's also on our public art committee, and we talk about the thread trail, and we've met with Juan to incorporate him, and so that's a goal also,
Okay.
to help do some fundraising to try to incorporate a sculpture for Juan on the Belmont part of the thread trail.
Okay, great.
So you're absolutely, we would love to get some more Juan art in downtown.
And I'm just throwing this as an idea. I mean, is there any opportunity in the rec center?
That would be great. We can.
It's a blank canvas if we're talking about potential art with Martha.
Yeah.
Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I know that Jamie at one time was working on some art here. There's a circle area out here in front, so there's been a lot of conversations about incorporating art in our facilities, and so yes.
Does that come from
Yes,
the
all that
city, or
money.
is it primarily private donations for this type of stuff?
A little bit of both. The Juan Logan mural, the DVDA raised some money. It was a Facade grant. Then we also had a private donation. And I feel like the more that we get involved and the more that we do, we got the Duke Energy Foundation grant. And so we are currently working with some business owners downtown to incorporate some murals. They'll be applying for a Facade grant and the Duke Energy grant. And so I think the more art we incorporate downtown, the more we'll be known as having more public art, and that will be on the radar. And there's some donors out there that could help fund public art, and there's other large grants that we could apply for.
Thank you.
To shift gears a little bit, talk a little bit about the sidewalk pedestrian plan. I know we went to one of those public meetings, I think back in the summer.
At TechWorks?
Yeah, but I think there might have been one more recently, and there's another one next week.
Next week.
Okay.
It's our understanding they're going to hold some public in the neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay.
It's on October 26th at 6 p.m. here.
Okay. And
City
just
Works.
maybe provide a little bit more background on what all that entails, what's going on.
Amy, can you speak to that? Trip Larrett has been our representative for Main Street and design, and so he gives updates and he attends the meetings, and so I don't think we're prepared to give as much of a detail.
Okay. I mean, just a general sense of what we're trying to increase connectivity and make the city more walkable through this process. Would that be a very
That would be a very adequate assessment, yes.
overgeneralization? Yes.
Yeah, to identify where sidewalks are needed in downtown and throughout the city, and where sidewalks need repairs to make it more easily accessible for people to.
Yes.
Phil, for the artwork in a new development that we were talking about, do you have any idea about what kind of money you're talking about? And is that going to be ultimately passed down to the people who purchase homes there? Is that going to filter down to them to absorb that cost?
Majority of the public art programs or percent of art programs primarily are commercial construction, not residential. And so a lot of times it's like 1% of the construction project, at a certain threshold. So depending on the size of the project, it may leverage $5,000 to $10,000 per project, or 50, 70, depends on the size of the budget, construction budget. And I know that Shelley had given us, I think it was Indian Trails, a community that she knew of that had a really good percent for art program. And so we've been trying to look.
On that note, do they receive any type of tax reimbursements or rebates or deductions if they do provide that for the overall project? Like, is there an incentive in financial?
No, it just gets built in as part of the construction budget.
I mean, it'd probably be an expense if nothing else.
Right.
Any other recommendations for Amy and the design committee? I know we talked about public space, Stowe Park, Upper Field. Any other recommendations or suggestions, projects, ideas?
I'm an advocate for using that land next to the police department for parking. Always have been. I think it's in a prime location. If the trolley goes by, I think there's a nice tie in there to, change that parking from a short walk to a short ride downtown.
And that lot has been identified. It's on our radar as well.
We've already
For the police department.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think
we're already drafting. Two-step-based process. It makes sense. We got to back that up.
Well, as far as Stowe Parks, you said it was fortuitous that the concert was moved up there. It was more so than you think, because there was some discussions about actually selling that lot for parking to the middle school, which thankfully didn't get any traction. So the timing of whatever happened with that concert was very timely.
And we'll be activating the upper field as well during the Festival of Trees and Christmas Village to try to expand that as well. So yeah. We're looking for ways to activate all aspects of the park and make it better for the community.
It's a huge asset. It's just, like I said, it's a diamond right there. So.
And if we're dreaming, one of the things we probably should look at is the train, using the train at some point, because there are pieces of it that can be put together. And that originally, because I, of course, was not alive then, but evidently it went around the upper part. I thought it went around the lower part, but I would like for us to at least see if there's a possibility to do something with the train that used to be there.
Are you talking about the Stowe Park train?
Yep.
I full-heartedly
idea.
support that as well.
And so, well, actually for Christmas Village, we will have a train going around the track up on the upper field. But let me ask, because that could be a really good action item on our work plan as far as the train. It's my understanding, so the one or two pieces was restored. Is there still other cars that are stored that have not been restored? Do we know?
To my understanding, the Historical Society still has ownership. The Belmont Historical Society is just being housed here. Because interestingly enough, this is something I talked to Jamie and Adrian when I first got elected, because history buff, I'd love to see it running again. But there are, and maybe the city of Gastonia and the city of Shelby would be good resources for us, because both of them have very good, active, successful programs with the train, similar to the train that we have, ours is just an older model, I believe. But they just refurbished those. To my understanding, there are other cars, but I think they're privately held and have not been restored, and I know they're not here.
There's at least one or two up there with the engine that have not been restored.
And those non-restored cars are owned by
I would say the
private individuals or the Historic Society?
Well,
Historical
it's,
Society.
I would check with them.
They had been having a conversation with the trolley about putting it in their building for people to be able to see.
I think that conversation is over.
It is? Okay.
I think.
Yeah, when I last talked to them, that wasn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the Historical Societies, I think they're just trying to figure out what they want to do with it.
But last I talked with them, checked with them again, there was interest if it could be put back to use, then full-heartedly, but I would check with them.
I
Do we
think
still have the track? or would we need to?
No, I don't think we
require
have the track.
I don't think so.
We would need, like I said, Shelby and the city of Gastonia have 2 successful programs. I think we'd want to check with them and see who they use, what vendors they use to set it up.
And how much?
And how much, yeah. But thanks for bringing that up, Martha.
Yeah, that could be a good collaborative effort between Main Street and DVDA and the Historical Society to have conversations and then try to look into, if we're fundraising, to try to look at investing into restoring the rest of the cars. Thank you, Martha. Any other before we move on to promotions? So the focus of the promotions committee is about creating special events, bringing people into downtown, having that image promotion and retail promotion to also help support our downtown businesses. So even though our 4 committees have very distinctive focus or a lot of overlap between our committees, and so if all 4 are working together, then you have a great revitalized downtown like Belmont. And so Jennifer is not only the chair of our board, but she's also the chair of our promotions committee. So I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer.
Thank you, Phil. Gosh, so much happening in Belmont. Let's start with Shop Small Saturday, which is coming up the day after Thanksgiving. Last year, our gift card promotion leveraged over $50,000 in sales for our downtown merchants. Moonlight on Main, biggest event that we've ever had in downtown, and we were awarded the best event in North Carolina by the North Carolina Association of Festivals and Events. I believe we had 20,000 people in downtown for those 3 weekends of Moonlight on Main, and just thanks to all of our volunteers and our Main Street team, just an amazing job for a very, very large event. Christmas Village is coming up too. We've grown that event every year. Last year we grew it by adding a carousel, which was a very, very popular focus of that Christmas Village. We've also added a gingerbread house competition. Attendance at that Christmas Village grows every year. And we have decided, due to the popularity of Christmas Village, it's traditionally been held from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. And we are going to hold that event from 1 p.m. until 9 p.m. So that will require some additional volunteers, but we're very excited about that possibility. And we think it'll be very successful. And of course, our Friday Night Live, we moved those concerts to the upper field. And I'm grateful for the vision of Main Street, of Morgan and Cassidy and Phil to do that, because as we've already discussed, it's been very successful. Beer sales were great. Large crowds. We got a lot of feedback. We had all of our volunteers speak to our visitors and ask them if they preferred it on the street, if they preferred it in the upper field, and the majority preferred it on the upper field. It just had a very family-friendly feel to me, which I really appreciated that.
Hey, Jennifer, on that, did we ever circle back with the Main Street businesses and what their kind of relation or what their thoughts or opinions were on that?
I think we did. We got, I think the majority of them, I'll pass this over to you.
So we did. And so, of course, Angela's always throwing out great ideas. When we were, as a board, when we were talking about after that first concert, when we moved up to the field, Angela was the first one that said, let's reach out to all of our downtown businesses. Let's get feedback from them first before we make a decision on moving, because we really want to support our downtown businesses. So we created a little survey, sent it out to our downtown businesses. We got about 20 responses. And of those responses, only one was wanted to keep the concert up on the Main Street. And because that business was right there on South Main Street that benefited from the concerts. So he was very upset. Another business, I did hear from 2 other businesses that preferred having it, and that was more of a verbal feedback, that they liked it better on Main Street because their businesses, were better supported on that Friday night. But the majority of the businesses responded primarily the closing down of Main Street starting after lunch negatively impacted their business. And so even two of the more negative business owners on South Main Street basically came back and said, our business really didn't suffer that much. It just changed. And so, you know, he basically said whenever we have concerts there, instead of selling more steaks, he sells more burgers. But now having the concerts back up on the field, his business is back to a regular, I'm selling more steaks on that night. So he's okay. So in the end, it all worked out. And so, we always reach out and try to get feedback from our businesses and everything we do.
Awesome. Thank you.
But it is also easier on staff, as I understand it, too.
Easier on our staff, public works staff, the police staff, logistically, you know, not having to close the street down and being able to set up early, and not have to try to quickly get everything cleaned up to get the road open back up. Logistically, it's just so much easier. And we get through a lot sooner too. And it's really a cost savings on staff time as well. So.
Sophie, now your recommendations. What would you like to see?
Since I'm in the 55 and older crowd, we'd like to have a little bit more beach music because we gained a lot of our young families, but the people in the age category that I talk to, since I'm a part of it, we lost some of them. So if we could put just a little bit more of that back in, that'd be great.
You gonna shag dance? Do a little shag dance down there?
I'm not naming what I might do. The other thing I wanted to say, the Pops in the Park has been wonderful, and I've heard from people from Gastonia who've come over and that kind of thing, and those were outstanding groups. The ones I saw, and one of my friends brought a whole group of people from Gastonia, so those have been great. So I'm looking forward to that continuing.
Martha, I will thank you for that feedback on the music. We are trying to prevent some diversity. And so last year we did kind of go all tribute band, but it was very popular. This next year we're working on the lineup, and it will be a little more diversity and mix. Try to, you know, a little bit of something for everyone. And yeah, Morgan did a good job on our Thursday night pops. The crowds were bigger. We didn't hold pops last year because of Moonlight on Main. The year before, I think we did those concerts 2 years in a row, and you know, they were new, so the attendances were increasing a little bit, but then not having them last year. So we were happy with the turnouts this year, and the weather was great, which also helped.
And to your point, Ain't No Mountain High Enough is my favorite song. And sometimes I've been known to do the moves for my students, but I just don't do that generally. Okay.
Well, let's get that so we can see it.
Yeah. Morgan, Band of Oz. Okay, so we got to see Martha moves.
Some other feedback for Jennifer and the promotions, especially dance retail promotions.
I don't know if it would necessarily sit with your team, and we talked about this, me and Adrian talked about this a while back, but you know, I saw Cramerton is doing it, and it's something that I thought was a really good idea, and of course you get sidetracked. There's always so many good ideas, but promoting individuals in our community that give a lot of time and a lot of their talents, and maybe creating some type of an award program where people from the community get to suggest or submit their applications, whatever, reference or recommend. I mean, I think that would be, again, I don't know if it's this group, but in regards to promotions, I think we have a lot of great volunteers that put countless hours. I mean, I think that would be something that we could afford to do. So just a thought. Cramerton, I think, I saw something on Nelson's page the other day about it, and it kind of re-sparked it for me because I had mentioned it. Again, so many great things are going on. It's hard to keep up with it all, but just as an idea.
It's good that we're still putting signage out at the point in those kind of places, because even though we're doing all the social media, that still sometimes people either forget or don't realize it till they see that. So I really appreciate that.
That was your idea a couple years ago, so it helps.
And one other thing with regard to that, and it's not, but Belmont Abbey concerts, there are 5 or 6 a year, and they're free, and they're classical music. We need to contact them because they're not doing a good job at promoting it. And since it's free and it gives a different type of music opportunity, that would be great, because we have a lot of people moving into the area that don't know what's going on at the Abbey, as once again, they're not good at telling us. So if you guys kind of look in to see what we can do to help that
Yeah,
part.
we would like to partner with Belmont Abbey. So thank you for that recommendation.
Well, we did have a committee at one time working with Belmont Abbey, and one of the things we wanted to do is try to bring them into our community. And one of the ways they were talking about doing that was summer stock theater, because they do have their theater program there. It doesn't have to be a full-blown production, you know, it could be a snippet or whatever, but I always did kind of like that idea. Now with our new band shell, maybe give us an opportunity to showcase the Abbey players.
Yeah, and Morgan has an active dialogue with Belmont Abbey now, so we can add that to some discussions with Belmont Abbey. Yeah, I go to the Abbey Players performances. Love them.
Yeah, they do a great job.
They really do.
There used to be a car show also. Someone asked me, the city I don't think had any involvement with it, behind Friends that used to happen there, but they were in a very confined space at a band. I don't know if that'd be appealing on a broader scale, but now that you've got the upper field, I mean, if you could fill it up with vintage custom cars, that might be interesting.
Morgan, isn't there an upcoming event, Convertibles for a Cause?
The Topless Cruise?
Topless
Yeah.
Cruise. And when is that, Morgan? Thank you.
Topless Cruise.
Yeah, so Friends used to work with, was it the Shriners? What's the organization that raises money for, I think it's the Shriners. I think it's the Shrine, Richard, you're talking about the Shriners. So Friends, when it was Friends before the Bitter Buffalo, they used to partner with the Shriners and do the little car show on Wednesdays. And we would try to help promote that. Last year, well, then with the transition, I don't know if the Bearded Buffalo has continued that partnership or not, so we can reach out and ask and look into that.
If there's interest, I just know I love the old muscle cars. It was a great event for me.
Yeah, and just one more thing, one good event that I attended in Mount Holly, I hate to keep pulling it from other cities, was a chili cook-off. A lot of people, family residents, or family recipes. It was very competitive, but it was also fun. And I believe they were actually raising funds that night. The proceeds actually went to part of the extension of their greenway. In fact. So they leveraged that to receive additional fundings and support. So.
We had that for a while. I think it was spearheaded by Vince Hill, the chili cook-off. Kind of died off.
I heard that last week. They did a little reception for Vince at Everyday Market, and they talked about they used to block off, the street right there beside Caravan and do a cook-off. Right. Well, now that we have Morgan and Cassidy, we have, thanks to you added a position last year or 2 years ago, I can't remember. So I will quick update on that. So Morgan as the events coordinator, last year Cassidy was working, kind of training Morgan, and then we had Moonlight on Main, so that was a big undertaking. But now Morgan is running with events, and now Cassidy is focusing on community development, working with our downtown businesses, and so we might can take on a few extra things. And so now that we're all kind of focusing on our task at hand, so.
We're really trying to partner with our businesses as well. And I think about that as we discuss a chili cook-off, because we did have some discussion with Gabe at the Bottle Tree about a chili cook-off. And so I think we'll probably try to plan that for next year. There's also been discussion about partnering with the bars and restaurants for a St. Patrick's Day bar crawl.
I just remember the ill-fated one that we had in 2020. Well,
Yeah,
not
like
that
a day before COVID hit.
Yes.
Yeah.
You and I weren't there, Jim, but there were people walking the streets. There were people.
I know.
I still see the T-shirts.
I know.
Around
Yeah.
from time to time. Yeah.
Yeah, so we really tried to get the businesses to partner with us on some of these things, to get them to take ownership of some of these events. And I think it's important for them to do that.
Yeah, the farmers market.
Oh, yeah.
Farmers market, perfect example. We had a couple of businesses came to us and said, can we work together to do a farmers market? They got involved with our promotions committee. We worked with them, and now I think this Thursday is our second. farmers market. We all know that we had such a successful first farmers market, and so that was a product of collaborating, working with some of our downtown businesses. And so, like Jennifer mentioned, we have started working with some of our restaurants and doing some type of barbecue, chili, some type of cook-off. So there is interest there. So
Get there early.
Yeah.
Farmers market.
okay, we have one more. Any other suggestions, recommendations for Jennifer and the promotions committee? Okay, so Seth was not able to be with us, and so I'll be covering organization for him. But the focus for the organization committee is really about collaborating with other organizations and people, establishing those partnerships so that we're working more as a team, growing our volunteer base. We're doing more, and so having the volunteer. This is a volunteer-driven program. Organization focus is also about researching and writing grants to help support the other three committees and the work that's going on, and public relations and outreach, making sure that we're communicating with our businesses, keeping them updated on what we're doing, what's going on, and finding out what their needs are so that we can then have our EV committee focusing on that business support. So a couple of the accomplishments from this past year for the organization committee. As a result of Museum of the Moon, that was such a large undertaking, and we knew that we could not pull that off by ourselves. So we started reaching out to other organizations and partnering with them, like Elements of Empowerment. We collaborated. They wrote a grant. We partnered with them writing a grant to fund some things. The Shield Museum out of Gastonia. We had never partnered with them before. We set up a meeting with them, had multiple meetings, pulled them in as a partner. So many. We had some professional artists that came in that we collaborated with, and so we really grew those partnership opportunities. Belmont Trolley has come along thanks to Amy and Jim, and we have partnered with a trolley. We've actually attended some fundraising efforts, met with some donors, talked about the impact of the trolley in downtown to try to secure some support, financial support. And so, Main Street DBDA is doing anything possible to assist and partner with the trolley board. We've actually researched and, we wrote a few grants that's helped in our downtown, which I think Mark knows. Come November the 10th, we'll see some more change in the River District for the better. Volunteer recruitment. I really want to say that Al and Jennifer and Eileen, the three of them spearheaded a new program for us. The third Thursday at lunch, and then in the afternoons at 6 o'clock, they put the word out. They go to the everyday market, and we ask if you're new in town, want to get involved, come to the everyday market. We have a volunteer meetup. And so we've actually grown this past year, our volunteer base well over 100 by new people coming down to the everyday market and attending our volunteer meetup. And so thanks to them, that's been very beneficial to us. We've gotten some good volunteers for our events, but we've gained a few good committee members as well for each of our committees. And so that's been good. Because of Moonlight on Main and our Friday Night Lives did so well financially, the DBDA has now started trying to give back to the community. We gave some community grants or donations, for lack of a better word, here a couple of meetings ago to some local organizations, and so we're looking at doing more of that. And so that was really exciting for us to be able to give back to the community. And with that, what recommendations, suggestions, ideas, projects do you have that we can take back to our organization committee that's relevant to building partnerships? I know we talked about the Belmont Historical Society. I think that will be a good collaborative effort partnership on the trains, volunteers, grants. We did, Seth has been good about, he researched some grant databases that we've been looking at. for a minimal fee that we can then open the door to research other grant opportunities for us. And so ideas or suggestions for our organization's committee.
Are you going after large players when you're seeking grants? I mean, directly to where we've got so many headquarters here: Wachovia, Bank of America, Speedway.
We have started looking at some larger grants. We have sought out some sponsorships, but when you start looking at larger grants, they want to know if your organization has undergone an audit or a larger review. The DBDA has never gone through, never really had the need. Small operations that we've had, but this year we actually hired a new CPA firm 2 years ago. Karen Walker, she actually is a resident in Belmont. It's a smaller CPA firm out of Gastonia that specializes in nonprofit organization, and that was something with Angela's guidance and leadership. We really wanted to get back on track, make sure we were operating truly as a nonprofit for the DBDA. Some of the grants we've looked at, like I said, they've asked for an audit or an internal review. And so we're preparing for that now. So the DBDA recently voted to hire the firm to do a review so that we'd be in a better position to apply for some larger grants.
Okay, thank you.
There was some discussion a while back, and I know it percolated up to our level, because I remember talking about it maybe at this workshop last year, but about expanding the district. Whatever happened with that?
We had conversations with Sherry at the state, and she basically said, make sure you get your adequately staffed. And so by the time we got Morgan involved on the team, we were so involved with Moonlight on Main that we just have not. That kind of was a less of a priority. But it's still on our radar to bring that back up. As far as we were wanting to primarily expand the boundaries South Main Street to include the new development, mixed-use development, and the middle school. And then there was another area in Chronicle. I think it was kind of more just realigning the boundaries. It just made sense to expand them one block to align properly. We were also looking at the planning's, oh gosh, help me with the terminology, small business, or
the city center small area plan.
Small area plan, because a lot of our boundaries were very close in that area, and so we were trying to align, more perfectly with that. Yeah.
Phil, are we on the community foundation list? I didn't know whether we are or not, or can we be?
Let me be careful with what I say, because I know we're being recorded. We have applied over the last few years to a couple of foundation grants and have not been awarded.
Yeah, but can we be on their fun run list? I mean, on the
community run.
Yeah, the run.
Yeah, we could look into that.
Yeah,
maybe if we participated in the run, we may actually get a grant. But
yeah, well, sometimes you're not, but at least that way you're getting that % extra back. Because I know some of our organizations are on that list.
Okay, no, we can look into that.
Where did we leave the conversation at the social district? I don't know if you're going to get to this, but
so we kind of talked a little bit about that, and we didn't want to prepare a presentation. We know that Cassidy had did some research, and we worked with the police and discussed a social district at this time last year with you. And I think the feedback we got from you was we kind of want to give it a year or so, kind of see what's happening with the pros and cons from other communities around the state. There was a change to the legislation for social districts because it was a lot of unknowns. And so actually at the upcoming state Main Street conference in March, I believe they will actually be doing a breakout session on social districts to educate on what those changes were. And we'll be able to hear more from some of the communities that did implement the social district to get feedback on, the good and the bad, the ugly. And so after that, I think maybe we can come back and put together a presentation and kind of gauge where we're at. if you're okay with that.
No, yeah, I think that because I remember talking about it last year, and I know just from my own experience, kind of wandering through some of them, it seems like they're somewhat helpful, at least for the businesses that are in them. So, and I haven't heard of any real negative feedback on them. So I was kind of interested in kind of exploring that a little bit more. If, I mean, I don't know what the rest of the council thinks, but
Yes, because we talked about waiting to see, and so it's be a good opportunity after your March meeting.
yeah.
All right, Phil, does that conclude your presentation?
Unless there's any other suggestions, action items, goals, projects that you would like to give us.
Does anyone have anything further to ask or add?
No, just thank you all so
Yes,
much for
thank
what you
you.
guys do.
Yes,
I know there's so many volunteer hours put into this, so thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
All right, Phil, thank you, and your board members for coming to council. I appreciate it.
Thank y'all very much.
All right, with that being concluded, next order of business, consider approval of a downtown facade enhancement grant for 327 1/2 Catawba Street.
We came to you recently knowing that we had a $25,000 grant from the Duke Energy Foundation and kind of aligning that facade grant with the community enhancement grant, having one application process. Prior to that, we did have an applicant come in, and that was Jamie Price, who is the with the Catawba River Mercantile Barber.
Yes.
And so his business has done so well. He's located behind Catawba River Outfitters that he is now expanding to the 327 1/2 East Catawba Street. So he has submitted a facade enhancement grant. It did go through the design committee, Main Street review as well. And so this is the actual building. It's the first commercial building as you enter the River District. Then you have the KBN Interiors, which did a really good job. They were a facade grant 2 or 3 years ago. And then you have the kind of a row of nicely redone buildings. So kind of doing an investment here will be a nice kind of gateway into the River District. And so what he is looking to do is the scope of work is to prep the entire exterior, paint the exterior, and replace the awning. The existing awning is just a metal awning that's pretty beat up. When he presented his application, he was kind of wishy-washy as far as what type of awning he would like to put on the building. He was going back and forth between a standing seam metal metal awning, which here is an example of a standing seam metal, much more durable, would last much longer, versus a canvas awning. And so this is just a quick little rendering that he actually put together. He's not a graphic artist, but the scope of work would be to paint the entire building. And then when we presented the grant to the design committee was kind of left up with one of two options. As far as if you wanted to go with a cloth awning, the grant award would be a $2,000 grant award. Or if he went with, the design committee would like to encourage him to go with a standing seam metal awning. Much more durable, lasts much longer. And so if that was the case, that they would award a $2,500 or recommend a $2,500 facade grant to Jamie.
And at some point, doesn't that decision have to be made?
Well, but he was waiting to see if he was going to be awarded the facade grant. So, but yes.
Well, but I mean, don't we need to award in a specific amount?
Yeah, shouldn't he have the decision made before we award anything, which direction he's going?
If that's what you would like to do, I would go back to Jamie. He's ready to paint and move forward, but he's got quotes for both. And so just didn't know which direction he wanted to go. So that's why the design committee, the way that they proposed was, we would really like for him to do a standing seam metal. So we would like to award him a $2,500 grant to encourage him to do a standing seam metal canopy. But if he chooses not to, then we would only award him a $2,000 facade grant. And that was the kind of the same sentiment of the Main Street Board. Would like to encourage him to do a standing seam metal canopy.
What are the differences in the cost estimates? You said he had both.
He had both. Yeah, so the standing seam, it is more expensive. And so, and that was so it was a $500 difference as far as the grant award, the 2,000 versus 500.
Okay.
Councilwoman Stowe, it looks like it's about $1,000 more expensive to do the standing seam metal awning based on the applicant's information.
But I mean, I'm going to circle back. I mean, should he not have this nailed down if they're coming to us to request money or approve something to have that decision made before it's presented?
My gut is he was leaning toward the canvas awning because it was a cheaper. The design committee would like to incentivize him a little more to choose the standing seam metal because it is more costly. And so, my request is if we would like, I guess the same thing with council, I would like to award him up to $2,500 if he would choose the standing seam metal canopy. But the work has to be done prior to, it's a reimbursement grant. And so if he chooses to do the standing seam metal, then I would like to incentivize that. But if he moves forward with the canvas awning, then we would only reimburse him for that up to $2,000.
I'm not.
But I hear you, Mark. I mean, Richard.
I'm not particularly interested in the canvas awning, and the reason is that I'm not usually negative about any of this, but since it is the gateway to East Belmont, we want it looking really good. And so if we want that to happen and go along with what's going on the rest of the way through, I think the standing seam part of it, to me, is the only option that I would think is what I would be considering approving.
Yeah, that was kind of the direction I was moving in.
Yeah.
I mean, could we just approve a grant for $2,500 contingent on him doing the metal awning? And then just kind of eliminate, like if he wants to do the canvas, he can do it himself, I guess, would be the...
I would agree with
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
All right, that makes sense. Because I understand, like, when it went through the design committee and the Main Street committee, well, but at some point, a decision, like, and I feel like at this level, we need to approve, we can't, well, if he wants to do this, we'll give him this much. If he wants to do that, I mean, like, I feel like we need to be more specific. Okay. So I would agree with Mark's proposal.
I mean, does he have any, is his preference being driven strictly by cost, or does he prefer the look of the canvas? Do you know?
He understands that the standing seam metal is going to stand up to the elements and be long-standing. Canvas awnings, they're going to last max 10 years. Standing seam metal could last, 25 years. It's just the difference of the material. So, so it comes down to cost.
Okay, so I mean, that being the case, again, so he has no other preference aesthetically or otherwise, it's strictly driven by cost.
Right.
That's what I'm getting at. I don't want to try to force him into one thing by hanging money out in front of him contingent on you choose what we prefer.
Well,
This is a grant, so I don't mind being a little heavy-handed.
Yeah.
I mean, grants can, that's
because he doesn't have to apply for the grant.
Yeah.
If he doesn't.
That's true.
Particularly want it. I mean,
that's what we've applied for grants, and they say, well, you're not doing what we want you to do, so we're not giving it to you.
Okay.
I guess my last, it said in the packet that he had permission from the owner. I didn't see that actually in the packet.
Yeah, we did get an email.
Okay.
So the property owner is under management by the cottage keepers. We did get an email from Timothy, and so my apologies if I failed to include that, but they do have permission.
Okay.
Let me ask you, understand the goal is to replace the awnings, hopefully all the way down Main Street. If that's the case, is the goal to get everybody to go with the same look, hopefully?
I think some variety could be good. So, you know, we're talking about, you know, the metal slip covers across, you know, properties just beyond these, you know, that's a similar look, which you know, but so we're working on removing those metal slip covers and that metal awning, but then having a variety, you know, some diversity to give each individual building, you know, its own identity would be good. So.
Okay. All right, Mark, you want to forward a motion based on what you had said?
Yeah, I will move to award a $2,500 grant contingent on the applicant installing a standing seam metal awning.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Motion passes 4-0.
Great, thank you very much.
5-0. Richard, did you vote for it?
Well, I assume since I'm sitting in the mayor's seat.
You're allowed to vote.
When the mayor pro tem acts as mayor, he still votes.
Well, I've not supported these in the past. I'm going to continue that. I'll support the facade enhancement grant. So you have a 4-1 vote. All right, I think, okay, we have dealt with the Stowe Park restroom. So that would move us, I think, now to our Tourism Development Authority Board Composition Agenda Memo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. This is a follow-up item from a discussion you had at a council meeting last year regarding the number of seats for the Belmont Tourism Development Authority. There was discussion at the time of reducing the number of seats as members roll off. I believe you follow that process. You now have a member whose term is coming to an end and has expressed a desire to remain on there and to keep her seat. And so Mayor Pro Tem Turner and Councilmember Seelinger are your representatives to the Tourism Authority. And I believe you had some discussion about this at your last meeting or a recent meeting and wanted to bring this forward. So,
yeah, we discussed this at the last Tourism Authority meeting because Melanie's term is actually up this month. And we just lost the rep from the Hampton Inn, I think, due to some staff turnover there. But my understanding is that person will be replaced fairly quickly. But so we initially, I think the plan for council was to sort of slim down this board some because it got to be a little unwieldy. I will say that I've only been involved with the board for about 10 months now. But the concerns I had about the board last year do not necessarily apply now. I think it's in a much better place organizationally and operationally than it was 12 months ago. Melanie in particular has been very active in supporting the social media strategy for the board. And I know she's doing, I don't know exactly 100% everything she does, but I know she's doing a lot with working with Daniel on the marketing side of things there. And my concern is that if she's not doing it, someone would have to do it. And I'm certainly not volunteering. So I know she's technically eligible for, I typically will allow people to apply for 2 terms. So she's got 1 term.
Ted Hall was there for like.
Well, yeah, that's true. The rules generally do not apply to the Tourism Authority. So our other boards generally get 2 terms. Tourism special. So I figure I would bring this to you guys so we could kind of talk about it. Tourism Authority was interested in retaining her. If we're interested in pursuing that, they understand if we would like to not do that. But
let me ask, how many members are currently on the board, counting Melanie, and let's assume that there's a seat that will be occupied by someone from Hampton Inn?
That I want to say 6 sounds right.
There's 2 council members, 2 hotel representatives, and currently 2 other seats that are open with the removal of Ted's position, if that's with?
So we've got 5 members plus a chair, which is
With
how we work.
5 members plus a chair and then 2 open seats right now?
No, that's total membership.
Oh, okay.
So
Plus
Is
the
that
open
written
seats.
is that written somewhere that it's currently 6 members? Because I was confused by that. Is that in some sort of resolution, or is it just however many we?
this was something we kind of, I think, talked about.
We're only required to have the representation from council and from the hotels. Is that right?
But the hotel representatives have to be, or there's certain.
There's a proportionality.
Right, and I'm confused because the summary said 3/5 have to be active in the promotion of travel and tourism, but the resolution or the session law says 3/4. So is it 3/4 or 3/5? 3/4. Are we meeting that?
Well, we only have 2 hotels.
Right, but it says 3/4 of the members must be individuals who are currently active in the promotion of travel and tourism. So I don't think you necessarily, it says at least 1/3 of the members must be individuals who are affiliated with businesses who collect the occupancy tax. That's satisfied.
Yeah,
well, or it will be when the Hampton Inn.
Right.
Yeah.
But
technically the council members, I believe.
So council members are not required to be on there. They have been from the beginning to help get this authority launch back.
And you're
15 years
right.
ago.
Ted Hall's been on there a long time. I was on there for a number of years. Richard has continued to be on there. So we have not gone by our normal rules about how many terms you can serve.
Well, right now, the way we're structured, the chair does not vote. So that gives us an odd number. So,
but he's still a member of the board.
Right.
That would, I would assume, would count
I
towards.
think for purposes of counting people, he actually does work for some tourism thing up in
He
the
does.
motorsports.
The motor speedway.
Right. Yeah.
Actually, in this, well, I'm not trying to be difficult. In the city,
But somehow.
or general. Well, I mean, like, I'm happy to, it sounds like Melanie's
Yeah, we were
great,
right.
so I'm happy to, have her reappointed. Like, I just want to make sure, since there are additional requirements for this board, that we're in compliance with. It sounds like we're at least we will be in compliance with the 1/3. The 3/4 I'm concerned about.
So is it 3/4? Has to be people active in.
In the past has said that council members count towards
That 3/4.
3/4.
Okay.
Because by extension of your work, you're active in
All
promotion
right,
of
so that would be
tourism
4
in
out of
the city.
6. That's 2/3, 3/4. That's what's less. See, I'm somewhat good at math. Sorry, I was a social studies guy. What is Melanie? Is Melanie, would she be considered affiliated? I mean,
Well.
She owns her own business.
Yes, she's a small business owner. She did at one time do marketing and outreach for the Billy Graham Library. I think that's how she initially got on the board.
If it's an issue, can we not just update it?
No, it's
that's a state law.
Statute. Okay, I see what you're saying. Now.
So, in theory, yes, but we can't do it.
Yes. I mean, I'm happy to, I just want to make sure that we're in compliance with the requirements of this law.
So Ted Hall's position effectively went away, is what?
Yeah, we have not filled that.
Right. Because we did some like 5D chess, like we expanded. We appointed more members so that there'd ultimately be less members when because we knew Ted was gonna go off, and Jim Hoffman, I think, when he resigned from the board, I don't know if we necessarily filled that position.
No, we have 2 that we eliminated.
Yeah. I mean, if you're, Adrian Parks or whoever, if you're satisfied that we're meeting these requirements, it sounds like Melanie's great. I'm happy to, I just want to make sure that we're not out of compliance.
Yeah, are we going to get in trouble?
So when she was appointed, I think Mark mentioned that she was doing marketing for the Billy Graham Library, which had a direct impact towards for us because it's in Charlotte. But
it's the #1 tourist attraction in Charlotte.
Yes.
according to billboards.
And billboards have to be
But
accurate.
she probably
right?
designed.
So she was appointed in that capacity. She has since left Billy Graham Library, and she's opened a coffee shop, which is technically outside the city limits, but it's you can see it from Belmont, but because our city limits are weird.
Yeah.
So she is, I think, helping with the marketing as far as what she's doing as a board member. That's not her official capacity as a business owner. So I'm not sure, if she still meets the qualifications for that 3/4 of the board members who have to be active in the promotion of travel and tourism in the city. Now, as a business owner with a coffee shop, if she's promoting Belmont to her clients or customers, and she's promoting Belmont on her social media, maybe that's good enough. I'm not sure.
You shouldn't include laws because then I'm going to read them and wonder about things.
Light reading, Jim.
That was a good catch.
Because I also noticed that it says you're in section 2. You're supposed to have quarterly reports and fiscal year-end reports provided to council, and I'm not sure I've ever seen such a report. I noticed these things.
I'll talk to the tourism authority about getting you those reports.
Well, the city council, we want to comply with the statute. I'm sorry. The law says what it says.
No, I mean, I know they pull information on the revenue collected, so there's a bit of a lag.
Yeah.
But, I would think that would be doable.
So is the question whether you need are you specifically saying this position Melanie, or are you saying this position in general for this additional position? Because it could not
Well,
be
I think
filled
they
by
were saying
Melanie.
I think they were saying we had expressed the idea of contracting the board. We've had members rotate off who are not interested in re-upping, but here's a member who's interested in re-upping. What do we think as a board about that? And I think that's fine, but let's just be careful to make sure we're also in compliance with the law.
All right, so then we need a ruling on this before we proceed. I would yes. I mean, are we technically, do we find ourselves in compliance? Are we outside of compliance? Now, the case for Melanie is that she takes a lot of the work, her and Daniel, on social media and marketing right now. The position that we've been banding about for a while has not been filled. We've contracted with Barajas to do some of it. They are picking up the rest of the load and carrying it. That's operationally where we find ourselves. The component of were we in compliance to meet that 3/4 was not part of our discussion at that time. It is now.
Yeah, I don't know if that was a known issue.
Yeah, and I think you sort of have two related issues. You have the position, the board member, and then you have the person who you would appoint to fill the board. So if you want to keep that board position and not reduce it or eliminate it, but keep it, then, and if that person, whoever you appoint to fill that position, has to, in order to meet the 3/4 ratio in the statute, has to be someone who is active in the promotion of travel and tourism in the city, then that needs to be a qualification for whomever you appoint. So really your decision, I think, tonight is, do you want to keep that position or not? And then if so, we would advertise for it, and of course you have an incumbent member. She would have to explain how she meets that case and meet that qualification. And certainly, we open this up to anybody, so anybody who felt like they met that qualification could apply.
We have other applicants. Just throwing it out there.
Like, I don't want to gum up the works, but I also want to make sure we're in compliance.
Well, do we know if any of those applicants are people who just want to be on the board or people who actually satisfy the requirement?
I've looked at some of them, and some of them satisfy the requirement.
Which Melanie may or may not as well.
All right, well, I guess the other question is, if you want to shrink the board, if we were to shrink the board, does that bring us into compliance with our numbers then?
I think it would if we say that the 2 hotel folks, there'll be a second, there'll be a Hampton in person. And if you two count, that's 4. If we shrink the board, we'd be down 5.
So you'd have 4/5.
You'd have 4/5.
Which I believe is greater than 3/4.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
We have the
Yeah.
Battle of Wake Forest.
People do get freaky about fractions.
Yes.
Had to find a common denominator real quick.
I like fractions. So all that calculus.
That didn't do you any good.
I like trigonometry, like sines and cosines and stuff. Yeah.
Good.
So what do we do?
Well, let me ask you, do I understand this
Secants.
correctly? If we keep this position, and if we have someone who meets and satisfies the standards, does that bring us into compliance? Because I thought you were saying we'd still be out of compliance.
If she count, or if whoever we approve counts, we'd still have the 2 hotels, we'd have the 2 of you, and we'd have this additional person. That would be 5 out of 6. I think that
5/6.
5/6 is more than 3/4. Is that right?
Yes.
Martha?
Martha?
Yes, that's correct. You're all right.
Yes.
Oh, he does? How so?
Yeah, with motorsports.
Okay.
So he works in tourism.
All right.
Yeah.
Well,
Does the
But
statute?
technically, it's
I
not
mean,
in
do
the
you-
city.
Yeah.
But
Does
that's
the qualifier, you just have to be in the industry, or you have to be in it locally?
it
that's
says
what-
in the city.
in
but,
the city.
Promoting the city.
But
It didn't say
you don't,
which city.
But you don't need 100%. You just need 3/4.
Yeah.
All right, so I think you were saying earlier that it's possible, and the language in statutes can be somewhat flexible and sometimes not, depends on how you interpret it, I guess. The interpretation, I think you were saying it's for us to consider if she promotes Belmont through her coffee shop, is that a qualifier?
I said that's my opinion, that's something you could consider. I
I'm
think what
happy
you really
to-
need to look at is, do you want a 5-member board or a 6-member board? And if it's a 5-member board, then we let her know that she's not eligible to be reappointed. If it's a 6-member board, she would be eligible to apply, and then we have other applicants who would be interested in, and you go through your normal interview process.
So
All right,
you say the
so-
chair doesn't typically vote. Is that correct?
I mean, it's not usually.
Oh, yeah.
Most of what we do.
We,
is
under
by
Robert's
consent.
rules, we found that
Yeah.
Ted was voting, although he probably shouldn't have been.
Yeah, like I said, tourism is special.
And so Daniel decided he would elect not to vote because it could be in compliance. So that gave us an odd number for voting to eliminate the possibility of a tie.
Yeah.
But I mean, the question I guess before us, as Adrian says, first question to resolve is, do we want to maintain 6 or go to 5?
Do we, and I'm just throwing this, I wasn't here when this was established, do we remove the city council seat?
I mean, no. I think. I mean, if anything, we've expanded the boards on which we have city council liaisons recently.
Well,
So
I
I
don't
think
know,
it's
just try to get in with them.
Yeah.
Well, I think we
I mean,
count as a credit for the.
Yeah.
Yeah. They.
So we
yeah.
would keep 2.
So taking.
Okay, I see. Yeah.
What, Andre? I mean, I have no strong opinions either way. It sounds as though if, how long are the terms?
3 years.
3 years. I mean, it sounds like she's an asset to the board, and I don't feel strongly either way. But if it would allow her to re-up, and she's doing a lot of good things for the board, I think six would be fine. If considering that she's and our typical policy of if you're on a board and you're seeking reappointment, that we generally do so. I mean, I'm fine with that. I think the board would be better off for it. I think. Then the question becomes, well, do we count her towards someone who does like promotes tourism related activities in the city or travel?
Well, we could make that a question on the application and let her tell us how she does that.
Yeah, that would be a good interview question.
That's good. I like. Yeah, that's very
Oh,
good.
and so you're happy, Jim?
I'm happy.
As happy as Jim
Okay.
gets.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's happy.
Why don't we go through the interview process and see who satisfies the stipulation? Then we can make a decision to either stay where we are or shrink the board. Is that?
That's fine.
Yeah.
All right, Adrian, this was just discussion. You don't need anything on this, do you, as far as
No,
the
it
motion?
sounds like there's consensus to keep it at 6,
Okay,
and then
Interview.
you can make a decision based on the end of the interview. So you're authorizing us to schedule the interviews.
for
Okay.
people.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think
In a
if we could
roundabout way.
Thank
make
you.
sure that those are
That's the direction we
done
needed.
relatively soon, because we will.
Yeah, that's something that I actually need to talk to you guys about the next interview date. 'Cause
I think we talked about doing that October 24th
Yeah.
after
Oh,
the
yeah.
interviews with the
Yeah.
those are scheduled till
Oh,
6:30.
design team interviews.
Those are scheduled till 6:30.
Mm.
And I think that's gonna be a problem
Okay.
Yeah.
for people. So
Yeah.
that's why I wanna kind of look at, do we do it before the beginning of the November meeting? So it's a
Okay.
little early.
Okay.
Would, yeah, so
Okay.
I just need an answer on that one way or the other, so I can let applicants know.
That's fine. We have to have it before the
Before the
How
November
much,
meeting.
how much, what time would we start on November?
Would we start
Is it 4?
4:45?
third or 4:45.
Do you know how
Oh.
many interviews?
It's not as many but I'm adding more now because of this. So it's not as many as last time, but it's still a handful, and I want to make sure to give you guys enough time to actually vote for your who to appoint to the boards. And we were running really short last time, so if we could do 4:30.
4:30 would be nice because that would hopefully give you a little bit of a break so we could grab a bite to eat before, because you're going to have a long
Like
city
pizza
council
or
meeting.
something?
We can provide something.
when you say we're running short of board members,
No, we're running
Much
short on
of
time.
Time, so yeah.
Yes.
but we are short on any boards. Is
Well,
anything
they
critical?
pretty much met for the month at this point, with the exception of a couple. So it wouldn't make a difference to push it to November 1st anyway. But that would give, it's easier for people to do it earlier in the evening, like towards it. I think after 6:30, I think we're gonna have a problem with getting people here.
Well, let me put something out to the council. Why don't we would this be plausible to set a date certain for interviews? And we find out what works best for most of the applicants, and we do them that day. Because what's been happening is we've been doing most of them here, some here that can't make it. By that time, it's not fresh in my mind anymore. A lot of the people that we have interviewed, I think we would be within our authority to say, this is the interview date.
Yeah, if you want to be on the board, show up.
If you can make it, then we'll interview. If not, we're going to defer you to the next round.
Yeah.
Because it is, when there's weeks between them, it's difficult to recall for myself, what did I like about this candidate versus this candidate, because so much time has passed. I think that's fair for us in particular. Do you all?
I agree to an extent though, right? If they absolutely cannot make it, I think that we should have some type of leeway there. Of course, then that opens up to exceptions,
Yeah.
right? But there are certain instances, I believe we talked last time, that there's a work obligation, a family obligations, and some of these boards need members on there. And if we're the ones holding it up, we're doing the disservice to the boards. So.
Well, yeah, but at the other hand, if we've interviewed 4 applicants, we're waiting on one.
Oh, if it
to fill the
satisfies
board.
what's necessary, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But
I guess I'd say,
kind of a double-edged sword.
yeah, I understand what you're saying too.
At one point in time, we talked about doing it within 2 weeks.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, we don't
Give a
necessarily
period.
have to.
Yeah, so a period of time, we said we wanted to do the interviews within 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So you.
This would have satisfied that for the 24th. The only
Mhm.
problem is that now, because of the time to interview the company applicants, we didn't know it was going to go till 6:30.
Why don't we say this to sort of go along with, like, why don't, whenever we have a round, we say this is the main date and this is the alternate date. And if you can't meet two, one is under, if you can't meet either of them, then maybe you don't have enough time to, because board meetings require commitments as well, on certain days
So
of the
when
week.
we set the dates, we set 2
Let's set
dates.
2
Yeah,
close
this
to
is
each
your-
other.
This is your alternate date.
What if you do like council meeting and then workshop within whatever that month's
Or-
period is?
Yeah, and if you can't meet
So
either
it's
one
fresh,
of those,
because I do agree with you.
Yeah.
But I also want to offer equal opportunity
Yeah.
for everyone there.
Yeah. No, yeah, I like that idea.
I think that's fair. 2 dates.
Yeah.
That's good.
I'd like to go ahead and schedule them based on committees, like, we know that that's the month each year. There's 2 months each year that we do that. Because then you guys know it in your schedules, and then our board managers, our staff knows these are the 2 months that we're going to do interviews, and anything outside of that, you know, we have to wait till the next round, or if there's extenuating circumstances, we would discuss it. Does that work?
I think that standardizing it would be really
Yeah.
helpful.
Yes.
I mean, Parks, if we get in a pinch, do we have any authority to make like what they would call an emergency or recess appointment for a board?
Sure. I mean,
But I would limit that to sort of like where they don't have a quorum unless we appoint someone like.
Yeah, because we don't even
immediately.
technically have to do interviews.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's just to know that we have that option would be helpful if we have to, where we're in a pinch.
Yeah. I think so. I think we could do that.
Okay. Does that satisfy our discussion? All right, with that done, let's move on to item number 5, a report from our finance director.
Thank you. At the October council meeting, you asked to have an update on cash flow analysis at this workshop. So I'd asked our finance director, Jared Piles, to come up and provide that information to you. And there was also some questions about the recreation center project. And so we have representatives from Edifice here that can answer questions about the project as well. Yes, please.
All right, good evening, everyone. Tonight I put together a little packet that's also going to coincide with what we have on screen here. So what I did is this is going back to the original projected cash flow that I put together, updated with our current cash balances in our general checking account. So our current balance on hand in our general checking account is $5,669,085. And our projected cash balance by the end of this month is a ballpark $5.7 million. And then based on our 3-year average, I went back and analyzed our accounts to see cash receipts, cash disbursements for projected revenue and projected expenses over the next few months. And I also included the payment applications that will be coming from Edifice so that you can see what our projected cash balances will be with all those associated revenues and costs baked into it. So this is the graph that kind of shows that. You'll see the projected operating revenue, projected operating expenses, projected payment applications, and projected cash on hand, all in the bar graphs. And then in the third page is the projected payment applications that will be billed to us that have come from Edifice. So based on this analysis, we should be okay as far as cash flow. We're continuing to cash flow the recreation center until we can get these audits completed and get our loan once approved by the LGC.
And for the future period months, that's based off of what we booked for accruals, based off the expenses and the revenues we're anticipating.
That's
for
correct,
future
yeah.
months. So from an accounting perspective, that's already in line with what we projected for the future, and we're cascading out from our budget process, right?
That's correct, yep. So give you guys a few minutes to look at that. If you have any questions, certainly feel free to ask. I did want to add that this is completely fluid. You'll notice that the $1.1 million payment application that I have allocated in November, we were expected to be billed that in October. We still have not received that invoice. So obviously we can't pay something that we haven't been billed. So I've kind of kicked that down a month. So this is fluid. So if it so happens that we get billed 2 payment applications in a single month, I would then update the projected cash flow and would continue to monitor. We continue to monitor our balances daily anyhow, but obviously this would adjust that payment or cash flow analysis. But again, even so, we've got plenty of cash on hand to cover if we were to absorb 2 payment applications in a month.
And this for example, in the March period,
Mhm.
this does not include the reimbursement. So we're assuming in April we would receive the reimbursement.
I'm expecting by February, but
Okay,
I included
February.
March because I wanted to just think we would still have additional payment applications. But yes, by that time, we would have loan proceeds of over $13 million hitting our general checking account. We would essentially be replenishing our coffers at that point, and would be fulfilling what we project ordinance as far as anticipated revenues.
Okay, but for intensive purposes in regards to this does not include the
It does not.
reimbursement.
No. So it would look even better as far as cash
Right,
flow.
right.
Yeah. So I did not include the loan proceeds, but the anticipation is that we would be approved for the loan in February, with receiving loan proceeds February or March of 23.
What is our cash balance? What did our cash balance look like before the project started?
I'd have to pull that data, but it can fluctuate anywhere from 2 million upwards of 13 million in general checking. It really just depends on the timing of cash flow. Let's say, for example, we weren't dealing with the payment applications. You're seeing several $1 million in cash flow over the next several months. Our cash balances could hit $12-13 million in a given period. Again, it just depends on the timing of revenue and the timing of expenses. Typically, our revenue collections go down as the year goes on. Expenses typically remain ballpark the same month to month. That's just to kind of keep coincide with the budget, so we're not over. Some expenses are front loaded, some are back loaded, but for the most part, you're seeing a consistent output of cash, and then the cash incoming typically goes up and then trickles down as the year goes on.
Jared, one question. And since we are looking at best case and worst case scenarios, if the loan application took longer to get approved by our lenders, would there be an issue with us paying the full fare and then getting the loan?
No, it would not. This is just our general checking account. So
Okay.
we also have NCCMT term investment account that is completely liquid. We have about $10 million in there that we could transfer. But there would be an accounting side of that where we would need to keep up with that, potentially reimburse ourselves with any interest from the loan proceeds, but it's very minimal. We make maybe, over the last couple of years, it's really not been that successful, maybe $25,000, $30,000 a year in interest on that term account. But it is there for us if we did need to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Jared?
Well, I'm just having trouble reconciling these numbers. But like, if you're projecting a cash balance at the end of March of about $6.5 million, and our normal cash balance usually fluctuates in that range anyway, what do we need the loan for?
Because we're basically replenishing ourselves of cash that would be used for ongoing. You have ongoing business operations, because again, our revenues are going to not hit these marks. Is when you're seeing 4.5 million, 3 million, 2 million, 1.9, they continue to trickle down as the month goes on, but we're still going to see about $2.5 to $3 million going out the door every month. So we are going to need that money to replenish our coffers, and then also at the beginning of the next fiscal year, it's not all of a sudden we get $30 million in tax revenue on day one. We need to have that cash on hand to be able to continue business operations. We have not touched anything as far as restricted cash, stabilization by statute, PAL bill dollars, anything that would be restricted on our audit report. We would not touch that. It's not allowable. And I've consulted with a consultant that we've had come on site with us, as well as our auditors, and everything that I've presented and discussed with them has been okay with them to this point, as well as the LGC.
Well, I'm just going to say I do appreciate this. Again, this helps me put it into perspective again with cash holdings. I know that there's also stuff circulating out there in regards to what if we did push pause today. And I also want to understand what if we did. Obviously, this tells me, again, if you're looking at this, and we do have our hard deadlines with the audit. We've all discussed that. We understand where we are today. But if we were to push pause today, it's not necessarily just shutting off the valve, we're not paying it. We're going to continue to incur and potentially, we have this booked at a $13.5 million project.
Mhm.
This would then be estimated to become I don't know.
That would be difficult for me to project, but we are locked into 2020 and 2021 pricing. So if we were to pause, you would then be looking at, for additional supplies and materials, you'd be looking at current rates, which, as you guys know, inflation is very high right now. We would also need to pay payment applications for the work that's already been performed, not just with the one that we're waiting to be billed for, but the work that has been continuing to ongo. So you're looking at a couple $1 million there that we'd be already on hook for. And then you'd probably have to rebid. And it would be, just to put bluntly, it would be a kind of a mess to press pause.
Well,
It doesn't sound like it would be fiscally responsible on our part to do that. Is that correct from your perspective?
I would agree with that, yes.
Okay.
How long can we, like, at what point does getting the loan become financially necessary? How long will these numbers stay positive before we absolutely need to get the loan?
I would say 3 to 6 months after that. So by this time next year, at the latest, very, very latest, which we are on track to have these audits done and completed with the LGC approval for a loan in February. So, which I should have prefaced that with an audit update. They've completed final fieldwork procedures last week, tying up loose ends this week. Just a few items with AP accrual, a few debt pieces, schedule of expenditures for federal and state awards, which is basically just reporting our expenditures related to grant funding. And then they just sent over revenue and expense analytics, which is typically the last part of the audit. So they're going to begin drafting that report this week and still meet basically every timeline objective that I've given you in months past meetings.
So 2021 audit will meet the October 31st.
That's the goal. Well, that's kind of an arbitrary deadline because 2021 was due last October. But yes, that's the goal. Yes. Yeah.
Right,
yes,
right,
that is the goal.
right.
Yep.
And since our friends from Edifice came and enjoyed learning about the Main Street program and the tourism authority, I would like for Mike Carlisto and Tim Bender to come and just kind of give an overview of what, if the council chose to stop the project, what does that look like? Because it sounds pretty simple, but after talking with Edifice, it's not.
Do you want to give them a microphone
Tim, do you mind going to the podium? Use the microphone. Because the millions of people watching online are going to want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you guys for having us. And I guess to start, might jump in if I miss anything, but to start, we're here as your fiduciary. So whatever you guys need to do, we're going to work with you guys to kind of figure out the best way we can go about whatever is needed. That being said, this project is about 70% complete. So stopping or suspending a project at 70% complete at this stage of construction has some risk to it. Just of continuous payment. So Mike kind of broke it down to me a little bit, but it's about like stopping a train. When you need an emergency stop, you press that stop button, but that train's going to keep going about a half a mile till it finally stops. So we could hit the emergency stop button, but we got about 4.3 million left to bill on, and about 2.1, this is forecasted. Those materials are being made, arriving in transportation, in a warehouse. So you got about $2 million left. Over those couple of months when we stop or suspend, we have to meet with all parties from our subcontractors, our vendors, our manufacturers, and see what their costs are associated with that. So I can't stand here today and tell you exactly what it would be, but if it was a 3-month pause, a 2-month pause, a 6-month pause, it just depends on what happens and what's needed from the council. So with that kind of being said, let me open it up, ask other questions that you might have, might be able to give you a little insight on it.
I'm not in favor of getting paused, but I just have the question. If we did do that, how long would it be before you could come back and finish the project?
I would be kind of at the council's mercy on when they felt comfortable with us starting back up again.
But you can't snap your finger. We can't say on Tuesday, oh, hey, start again, and you'll be here on Wednesday ready to go. That's not how it works.
Correct.
You know, just like the emergency brake with the train, you need like a running
Correct.
start.
You go back to where you actually press the emergency button,
Yeah.
and then you get the train up and going again.
So it could be.
It could be a couple months.
Yes,
Absolutely.
right. Because you all would be doing other things, and the people would be elsewhere.
And I think Jared hit a good point. When you talk about the market and the economy and the price of this building based in May of 2021, those are really good numbers. And what I quickly looked at, and this is a general number, is we're about 25 to 35% increase on labor and material from 18 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
So the subcontractor's rights of their subcontract with Edifice tie back to our master agreement with Belmont. And that suspension allows them to also get out of it as well after 30 days. And they would still be owed work in place, any material that has been fabricated, and then costs associated with overhead and profit that is agreeable. And I can't speak to those numbers until they were all in the room telling us that, and that would be worst case.
Are we on target for our projected completion date?
Yes, sir.
What is that date?
Our schedule is showing the end of February, early March to substantial completion, which that's putting the owners in, showing them kind of how everything works, with a final open completion early May.
And let's say we did, again, to this perspective, push pause today. We wouldn't just let that building sit there as it is. What would we have to do in regards to additional costs to preserve it, I guess, is what would happen.
Sure, great question. So we would have additional costs to secure the building, to weather tight, let's say. There'd be additional costs for security of watching the amount of material that's in that building that would come into play. We would have to review and discuss as a team and a group about demobilizing, what that costs to get all the equipment off, get storage off. Are we leaving storage? Are we still going to pay for that storage that's there? Are we removing trailers? So there's a lot that goes into that. And that would be a discussion on how long we're thinking. And I could get into a little bit more detail or ideas of estimates on general conditions and manpower cost for the time to do that, but just not knowing, how long that stay or hold is, it'd be inappropriate for me to tell you a certain number.
And certainly under the contract, you're entitled to, there's a suspension. We're allowed to suspend for convenience, but I also believe that the contract sum would then be adjusted for increases in the cost and time caused by the suspension, delay, or interruption, and the adjustment of the contract sum would also include your profit. Is that correct?
Correct, and that is exactly correct. That's the wording of the 201.
Okay.
And that wording is also with every subcontract underneath our master agreement.
And again, that would be push pause. We're still paying that.
Yes, you would be paying those fees continuously through suspension.
So we would probably end up paying more as a result of pushing pause, and we would save by pushing pause.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
This has happened before with other towns. Until we showed them the impact of stopping the train analogy again. I want to say we had spent $5 million on a project nearby. To stop it was going to cost another 1.5 years ago. They decided that you are deciding.
So we're locked into $2021 now.
Yes.
If we were to push pause, you would have to rebid. We would be subject to inflated material costs, labor costs.
You would open up a can of worms, opportunities for other subcontractors to increase their numbers, blame inflation across the board.
It would also substantially increase our completion date.
It would, and it would also, one more point to that, Mike is right. One other thing to think about is the idea of a competitive bid. So it's not as simple as starting back over and bidding. You now have work in place of 70%. you get a plumber that wants to come back to finish that, you're open to what we just discussed, but competitively, we can't, other plumbers are not going to be as enticed in this market to come back in and give a number to complete a $40,000, $50,000 worth of work. Plus, you get into a warranty issue on, they don't know anything downstream. You know, it would be almost impossible for fire protection systems, the sprinkler system, for someone to come in other than the delegated design, the guy who stamped that drawing, to complete that system without doing it all over again, which would be additional costs.
The warranty situation.
And I would assume at 70% complete, you know, previously, you know, if it were earlier in the project, you might say, all right, well, there might be some additional costs as a result of this. Maybe they can be alleviated somewhat by scaling back the scope, and then we'd end up right around where we wanted to be originally. But I would assume at 70% complete, it's that can't really be done. You can't say now, well, we're not going to do this. You've already started, you know, laying that foundation, so to speak. If you understand what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we can't really say, all right, well, we'd increase costs at 2023 prices, but hey, maybe we can get back to where we were thinking we'd be by decreasing the scope. I mean, it's already there.
Yes. And or it's coming, or it's been fabricated,
Yeah.
or it has a shipping ticket.
Or long lead times. It's already, yeah, exactly. I've had the fortune or misfortune of being involved in a 3-month construction law case in Houston. So long lead equipment and all that. Yeah, it's just because you got to start fabricating it long before you, yeah.
Especially
so your primary completion date earliest would be end of February, possibly early March.
Yes.
Substantial.
I believe
okay,
that.
Substantial completion, which would coincide with the LGC letting us know whether or not we can go out for a loan.
Correct. And from the lender's perspective, you got collateral on this completed building.
Yeah, but then we're in the position of having to get a loan, which, I mean, there's not really anything we can do about that now, but, you know.
Let me just follow up for a sec. So, okay, so the scenario is you're going to be substantially completed by February. We can go out for a loan potentially by February. You say we can survive for 3 to 6 months without getting a loan?
After that.
Yeah.
After February 2023.
Okay, so 3 to 6 months after February. Okay.
Sir, we're not going to be running away at that point in time. There's still training, punch lists. Our people will be here for another month.
Yeah, substantial completion is just a milestone within the process. So completion, where we would open it up to the public, would be by May.
Well, that depends on what you guys want to do. Substantial completion will allow you to move furniture. People are going to work there and start activities in there.
Right.
What's that break-in period?
Substantial completion is when all the inspections are passed. Furniture can move in.
All right, do we have any more questions for either Jared or construction team?
No.
All right, gentlemen, thank you.
Thank
Jared,
you.
thank you.
We'll be here if you have any questions.
Thank you. And Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, also on the Finance Director's update, we wanted to update you on your request to use American Rescue Plan funding for premium pay for city employees. You discussed this in the budget, and I've sent you a couple updates on that. So, as we've said, so your goal and your direction to us was to make sure that staff making a certain income or less would receive a net $1,000 as premium pay using American Rescue Plan funding. And in order for us to hit that $1,000, we would have to look at each individual employee who's eligible for this, look at their tax situation, so that we pay them enough on the front end so that when you net out the taxes, the net is the $1,000. What we would suggest is that instead of doing it that way, we just do $1,500 payment to all employees who would be eligible. That way, taxes would be taken out, and someone would hit a, if you're on the higher income end and you pay a little bit more taxes, you're going to get, a smaller amount, but everybody would get at least $1,000. Doing it that way would cost $219,000 in American Rescue Plan Act funding. That's if you go with the maximum allowable income level, which would be any staff making $79,650. That is the highest income that would be allowed based on the ARP regulations. And that would cover, when we did these numbers back in August, that would cover 146 employees.
And Adrian, would that be paid at one time or over a period of time?
It would be one time.
Okay.
We would run a special
The reason
payroll
I asked that question, teachers received $1,000 total, and what they're doing is we're getting $50 a month, basically, which is interesting that they're doing it that way. That's why
the direction of the council, I believe, was
One
to
time,
do
lump
one
sum.
time. So it's a bigger impact to the staff.
Yeah.
What's
Not
the
spreading it out.
What's the income cutoff on that?
79,650.
Was that I can't recall because we did this back in July. You either do the higher of state average or county average, and I believe that was the state average.
The state average annual income is higher than the county average.
Correct. So yeah, and you're allowed to go. I think they guide you to do higher too. Yeah.
How does this come to them? Is it a one-time bonus? Is that how you would classify it?
Yeah. So it would be so you'd have your normal pay run, and Deborah and I would work together on that. It would probably be. We could coincide it with a normal pay run, but it would be its own separate, installment through our Paycor software.
And it's a taxable income?
Yes, it would be. It would be a taxable event. Now, there would be like ARP money is not allowed to be used towards retirement contributions. So the 6% for employee and then the roughly 13% that the employer would cover would not be allowed because we can't use ARP money towards retirement. That would include Prudential, 401k. So really, it would just the city would absorb the costs of the taxes related to that, and then obviously the employee would also absorb their costs in normal FICA state and federal taxes.
Under this scenario, when would you be able to roll it out?
We were targeting November during initial discussions, and I think we're still.
We wanted to bring this back to you to get your take on it. If you're satisfied with this plan, then we could run a payroll in November.
I think that's good timing before the holidays.
And we can obviously get the data together and put together an analysis and show you what the actual number is going to look like as far as the amount due to employees and then the costs associated for the city.
Should we consider a tenure requirement on this? So like if we hire somebody like last week, I don't know that necessarily makes sense to give them a bonus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, but what length of service would be a qualifier?
I'd be open to suggestions on that.
What's the current vetting period for our bonuses or bonus structure?
We don't have a bonus structure.
Or not, bonus, the merit structure, right?
So you have to be here to be eligible for merit, it's 1 year.
We could just say like 12 months out of November 1st or something if we're going to pay them out in November.
Sure.
I mean, that would seem to make sense,
Yeah,
but is there
I think so.
any guidance from other municipalities, what they've employed?
So I will consult with some of my colleagues, and then we also want to make sure that based on the compliance supplement with procurement for this, we want to make sure that there isn't a stipulation that you can't
kick anybody out.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so a year from November of prior?
Well, if you're going to pay them out this November, I would say 12 months from November 1st.
Okay. Yeah, we can look at that.
And I certainly think that's appropriate because those people have not lived through the extremes that the other employees have.
March is when we brought this up, I think, at the budget retreat. So, I mean, it's not too shy off from that period. So, nothing was set in stone. And just for public record, this is ARPA funds. This isn't just cash that we have laying around because I know we just had a cash discussion.
It is not included in that. Yep.
Right.
ARPA it's in it, and it's a completely separate term account, untouched. Whenever you guys decide to allocate that, we then transfer that from that account to our general checking to fund
So
set
the 600,000 we just approved for the restrooms is not in that, right?
It is not.
Okay.
It's
That's
in,
what
it's
I
in a
was
separate bank
thinking.
account,
Okay.
standalone. Yep, not even touched.
Which I think is an important distinction that the folks know. This is not general fund. This is
Yeah.
ARPA.
Yeah.
It's a qualifying use within
Strict
ARPA.
qualifying use.
Yep.
And
Okay.
just as an aside, no teachers are going to hit that $79,000 mark, so that's why all of the teachers are getting it.
Are there any more questions for Jared on this? No? Okay. Thank you, Jared.
Thank you, council.
Thanks, Jared.
All right, with that, we have a closed session.
So, yes, are we going to need? Okay, so I would move to go into closed session for the purpose of consulting with the city attorney on privilege matters concerning the case of Southern Home Group LLC versus City of Belmont pursuant to General Statute 143-318-11A3 and include Marshall Walker within the closed session.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we're in closed session. Can we make sure that our